selfstudies.com/books/ncrt hyphen books hyphen pdf slash english slash class hyphen 9 class 9 India and the contemporary world 1. The French Revolution is a chapter 1. Section 1, Events and Processes. In Section 1, you will read about the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and the rise of Nazism. In different ways, all these events were important in the making of the modern world. Chapter 1 is on the French Revolution. Today, we often take the ideas of liberty, freedom, and equality for granted, but we need to remind ourselves that these ideas also have history. By looking at the French Revolution, you will read a small part of that history. The French Revolution led to the end of monarchy in France. A society based on privileges gave way to a new system of governance. The Declaration of the Rights of Man during the Revolution announced the coming of a new time. The idea that all individuals had rights and could claim equality became part of a new language of politics. These notions of equality and freedom emerged as the central ideas of a new age, but in different countries they were reinterpreted, and rethought in many different ways. The anti colonial movements in India and China, Africa and South America produced ideas that were innovative and original, but they spoke in a language that gained currency only from the late 18th century. In chapter 2, you will read about the coming of socialism in Europe and the dramatic events that forced the ruling monarch Tsar Nicholas II to give up power. The Russian Revolution sought to change society in a different way. It raised the question of economic equality and the well being of workers and peasants. The chapter will tell you about the changes that were initiated by the new Soviet government, the problems it faced, and the measures it undertook, while Soviet Russia pushed ahead with industrialization and mechanization of agriculture. It denied the rights of citizens that were essential to the working of a democratic society. The ideals of socialism, however, became part of the anti-colonial movements in different countries. Today, the Soviet Union has broken up, and socialism is in crisis. But through the 20th century, it has been a but through the 20th century, it has been a powerful force in the shaping of the contemporary world. Contemporary world. Chapter 3 will take you to Germany. It will discuss the rise of Hitler and the politics of Nazism. You will read about the children and women in Nazi Germany, about schools and concentration camps. You will see how Nazism denied various minorities a right to live, how it drew upon a long tradition of anti Jewish feelings to persecute the Jews, and how it waged a relentless battle against democracy and socialism. But the story of Nazism's rise is not only about its few specific events, about massacres and killings. It is all about the working of an elaborate and frightening system which operated at a different level, which operated at different levels. Some in India were impressed with the ideas of Hitler, but most watched the rise of Nazism with horror. The history of the modern world is not simply a story of the unfolding of freedom and democracy. It has also been a story of violence and tyranny, death and destruction. The French Revolution. On the morning of 14 July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. The king had commanded troops to move into the city. Rumors spread that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. Some 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. They broke into a number of government buildings and searched for arms. Finally, a group of several hundred people marched towards the eastern part of the city and stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunition. In the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed and the prisoners released. Though there were only 7 of them, yet the Bastille was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. Let's search the meaning of despotic, on Merriam Webster. Despotic. DESPOTIC. Despotic, of relating to or characteristics of a despot. What is a despot? A ruler with absolute power and authority. Sounds correct. The despotic power of the king. The despotic power. What is the despotic power? No, it is not that. Despotic power. One exercising power tyrannically. Tyrannically, yeah, this sounds correct. Despotic power. One exercising power tyrannically. The power of the despot, right? Despotic power means power of the despot, and the despot is the ruler with absolute power and authority, which makes sense that the king is a despot here, and his power is the despotic power. The fortress was demolished and its stone fragments were sold in the markets to all those who wished to keep a souvenir of its destruction. Let's find out souvenir. I think it is remains, is because of how it is written. Something kept it as a reminder, as of a place once visited, yeah, of a reminder. It will remind about the destruction of the fortress and the fortress, obviously. The days that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high price of bread. Countryside means the far areas, like the boundaries. Let's search that too. Countryside. Merriam Webster is the best app or website to search all the words that you think to find or want to find the meaning of, a rural area, the inhabitants of a countryside. Yeah, a rural area. I was wrong about that. That it was the uh, covering or the border. It is the rural areas. They are the countrysides or the countryside. The day that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high price of bread. Much later, when historians look back upon this time, they saw it as the beginning of a chain of events that ultimately led to the execution of the king in France. Though most people at the time did not anticipate this outcome. How and why did this happen? This picture is the figment storming the Bastille. Soon after the demolition of the Bastille, artists made prints commemorating the event. That's just the commemorating meaning, commemorating. Commemorate, I guess, is the first. Seriously. Yeah. To call to remembrance. Okay. Call to remembrance. To call to remembrance. Yeah, it sounds. Yeah, to serve as a memorial of sounds better. Just to serve as a memorial of. Yeah. So here that are the prints, these prints that are here, maybe this is not a print, but I think that is it is, so this print commemorates the event, that the Bastille got demolished. French society during the 18th century. In 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon family of the kings ascended the throne of France. He was 20 years old and married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. Upon his accession, the new king found an empty treasury. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. Adding to this was the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. Under Louis XVI, France helped the 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy, Britain. The war added more than a billion livres to a debt that had already risen to more than 2 billion livres. Livre is the unit of currency in France, discontinued in 1794, as written below. Lenders who gave the state credit now began to charge 10% interest on loans, so the French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. To meet its regular expenses, such as the cost of maintaining an army, the court, running government offices, or universities, the state was forced to increase taxes. Yet, even this measure would not have sufficed. Let's find out the meaning of sufficed, to meet or satisfy need. Yeah. So the need was not sufficed, or satisfied, I can say. Let's find out the pronunciation of liver. On American, we can find out the pronunciation, obviously, or along with the meaning. Livre. Livre. It's livre. So let's proceed with yet even this measure would not have sufficed. So the as we were talking about the French government when it increased the taxes, so even this all of this that they increased the taxes, forced the taxes actually. It was forced to increase taxes to, but it was not enough to satisfy his needs. French society in the 18th century was divided into three estates, and only members of the third estate paid taxes. That means the rest two estates did not pay taxes. The society, the society of estates was part of the feudal system that dated back to the Middle Ages. The term old regime is usually used to describe the society and institutions of France before 1789. Fig 2 shows how the systems of estates in French society was organized. Peasants made up about 90% of the population. However, only a small number of them owned the land they cultivated. About 60% of the land was owned by nobles, the church, and other rich members of the third estate. The members of the first two estates, that is, the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. The most important of these was exemption from paying taxes to the state. The nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. These included feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. Peasants were obliged to render services to the lord, to work in his house and fields, to serve in the army, or to participate in building roads. So let's proceed to Fig 2, a society of estates. Note that within the third estate, some were rich and others poor. First estate, clergy. Second estate, nobility. Third estate, comprises of big businessmen, merchants, court officials, lawyers, etc. Then comes peasants and artisans. Then comes small peasants, landless labor servants. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes from the peasants. Let's search the pronunciation of tithes. 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 Tithe. 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 Let's hear it louder. Tithe. Tithe. It's tithe. So it's tithes. It's not tithes, it's tithe. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes. Let's reload this. The church too extracted its share of taxes called tithes from the peasants, and finally all members of the third estate had to pay taxes to the state. These included a direct tax called tile. Let's search that pronunciation. Tile. Tail. Tail. Okay. It's tail actually. These included a direct tax called tail and a number of indirect taxes which were levied on articles of everyday consumption like salt or tobacco. The burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was borne by the third estate alone. So you can actually search all the pronunciation as well as meaning of all the words that are being said here, are written or are visible to you on this page, on Merriam-Webster through Play Store or through website. So what is a tail? Tail is tax to be paid directly to the state. That is the tail. Special functions in the church. The struggle to survive. The population of France rose from about 23 million in 1917, in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. This led to a rapid increase in the demand for food grains. Production of grains could not keep pace with the demand. So the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly. What is a staple? What is the meaning of staple?
Staple.
Staple. A commodity for which the demand is constant. Sounds most appropriate. A commodity for which the demand is constant. So the price of bread, which was the staple diet of the majority, rose rapidly. Most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owners fixed their wages, but wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. So the gap between the poor and the rich widened. These things became worse whenever drought or hail reduced the harvest. This led to a subsistence crisis, something that occurred frequently in France during the old regime. So now the new words in this are subsistence crisis, an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. And there is a fig here, at fig 3, the spider and the fly, and anonymous itching. Anonymous means one whose name remains unknown. In this, it is written that, in this picture, it is written that the nobleman is the spider, the peasant, the fly. There is another writing is, the more the devil has, the more he wants. Another writing is, the poor fellow brings this poor fellow, this poor fellow, it points to the guy who is uplifting a bag of food in his hand. This poor fellow brings everything: grain, fruits, money, salad. And the right hand of this fellow who is standing has money, most probably. The fat lord sits there, which is in the picture, ready to accept it all. He does not even care to grace him with a look. Grace him means, let's search the meaning of grace too, and the pronunciation also. Grace.
Grace. Grace.
Grace. Oh, let's go back.
Grace.
Grace. A controlled, polite, and pleasant way of behaving. That sounds appropriate. It is not a man created to grace him with a look. Let's search again. To grace him with a look. Grace him with a look. Is it like charm him with a look? I guess it can be charm him with a look. I think, yeah, that sounds better. Charm him with a look sounds better. No. A controlled, polite, and pleasant way of behaving. That sounds better. Yeah, according to the examples also in there, which actually confirms that his behavior, with others was not polite, or you can say, or pleasant. Activity. Explain why the artist has portrayed the nobleman as the spider and the peasant as the fly. I have actually written its answer. It is because the fly is eaten by the spider, hence the fly serves the spider. Here the peasant also serves the nobleman. So the both fly and peasant serve while the spider and the nobleman get served. So that is the appropriate answer, which I think, but yeah, you can think also and find a better one. Or if it is the best, then you can write it again. How subsistence crisis happens. Bad harvest. Activity. Fill in the blank boxes in figure 4 with appropriate terms from among the following: food riots, scarcity of grain, increased number of deaths, rising food prices, weaker bodies. Figure 4. The course of the subsistence crisis, bad harvest leads to the first thing of it all is a scarcity of grain, and then the first thing that scarcity of grain will lead to is rising food prices, and rising food prices will lead to the poorest can no longer buy bread, as it is written there, and the poorest can no longer buy bread will lead to two. The first, will there be food riots, and the second, will there be weaker bodies. So the food riots will not obviously lead to these epidemics, but lead to increased number of deaths. But the the weaker bodies will lead to these epidemics, which will also lead to the increased number of deaths. So this is the appropriate answer that I've written here, which you can see and verify. We have to find the first that causes, like when we see an arrow, then we have to write the first one of all the following given that can happen after. A growing middle class envisages an end to privileges. In the past, peasants and workers had participated in revolts against increasing taxes and food scarcity, but they lacked the means and programs to carry out full scale measures that would bring about a change in the social and economic order. This was left to those groups within the third estate who had become prosperous and had access to education and new ideas. The 18th century witnessed the emergence of social groups termed the middle class, who earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods such as woolen and silk textiles that were either exported or brought by the rich members of society. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate included professions such as lawyers or administrative officials. All of these were educated and believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. Rather, a person's social position must depend on his merit. These ideas, envisaging a society based on freedom and equal laws and opportunities for all, were put forward by philosophers such as John Locke and Jean-Jacques Rousseau. In his two treatises of government, Locke sought to refute the doctrine of the divine and absolute right of the monarch. Rousseau carried the idea forward, proposing a form of government based on a social contract between people and their representatives. In the spirit of the laws, Montesquieu proposed a division of power within the government between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. This model of government was put into force in the USA after the 13 colonies declared their independence from the Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. The ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in salons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. Let's turn to the idea of intensively. What the idea of intensively means. Intensively. I guess intensive is enough. Yeah. Highly concentrated. Tending to strengthen or increase. That sounds better. Let's search all the meanings of it. Acute, almighty, blistering, deep, grateful, excruciating, explosive, exquisite, fearful, fearsome, ferocious, fierce, frightful, furious, ghastly, hard, heavy, heavy duty, hellacious, intense, keen, profound, terrible, vehement, vicious, violent, light, moderate, soft. I think it resembles close to tending to strengthen or increase. Tending to strengthen or increase sounds the best. Sounds the most appropriate. That the ideas of these philosophers were discussed intensively in salons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. Intensively. Were discussed intensively. Highly concentrated. Many times I think that NCRT books are not written logically, in like they don't think that how it will end, how will someone find its meaning actually. So the NCRT books are outdated as well as badly written, very badly written. What I'm assuming here is that they were talking about it a lot. You can think about it like this. They were talking about it a lot, like what happened in the ideas of these philosophers, like all of these philosophers that were proposing, like the Rousseau or John Locke, that were being discussed, a lot in salons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. These were frequently read aloud in groups for the benefit of those who could not read and write. The news that Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. So, say accounts of lived experiences in the old regime. So, one thing I may have forgot to talk about the old regime, or maybe sorry, I talked about old regime. Yeah, accounts of lived experiences in the old regime. See, the truth is that you have to revise to remember all of this, what I'm talking about, as well as the book. If you want to remember anything, you gotta revise it. It's as simple as that. Source A, accounts of lived experiences in the old regime. George Danton, who later became active in revolutionary politics, wrote to a friend in 1793, looking back on the time when he had just completed his studies. I was educated in the residential college of Places. There I was in the company of important men. Once my studies ended, I was left with nothing. I started looking for a post. It was impossible to find one at the law courts in Paris. The choice of a career in the army was not open to me, as I was not a noble by birth, nor did I have a patron. The church too could not offer me a refuse. I could not buy an office as I did not possess a sou. Let's search about patron. Yeah, let's search about patron. What is patron? Patron. Pronunciation.
Patron.
Patron. A person chosen, named, or honored as a special guardian, protector, or supporter, I guess. A wealthy or influential supporter of an artist or writer. Okay. A social or financial sponsor of a social function. I guess the one who buys the goods. No, no, no. Is it a master? I don't think so. Is he? One that is to help an individual. A person chosen, named, or honored. No, it doesn't sound better. I guess the one, yeah, the one that uses wealth or influence to help an individual, an institution, or a cause. Here, that person is the patron that is being talked about here. So he did not have a patron, neither he was a noble by birth. The church too could not offer me refuse. Let's search about refuse. Pronunciation.
Refuge.
Refuge. Shelter, protection from danger or distress. A place that provides shelter or protection. Yeah, refuge. This sounds the most appropriate. Refuge. The church too could not offer me a refuse. I could not buy an office as I did not possess a soul. I guess here so here means anything. Like you don't owe anything. You don't have anything.
Sues. Sue.
It is shoe. Shoe. An old French coin equal to 2012 deniers. So he did not possess is Sue. Let's search again the pronunciation. Correct it. Revise to remember guys.
Sow. Soul.
No, it's not this. It's the previous one. Let's search again. SOU.
Sue.
Sue. Yeah. As I did not possess a sou, my old friends turned their backs to me. The system had provided us with an education without, however, offering a field where our talents could be utilized. An Englishman, Arthur Young, traveled through France during the years from 1787 to 1789 and wrote detailed descriptions of his journey. This is the second account of lived experiences in the old regime. He often commented on what he saw. He who decides to be, now it's his writing, it is what he wrote. He who decides to be served and waited upon by slaves, ill treated slaves at that, must be fully aware that by doing so he is placing his property and his life in a situation that which is very different from that he would be in had he chosen the services of free and well treated man. And he who chooses to dine to the accompaniment, let's search about this too. What it means. Accompany, we all know. Accompaniment, that we don't know. I don't know, sorry.
Accompaniment.
Accompaniment. All right. Accompaniment. An accompanying situation or occurrence. Most possibly companion. And he who chooses to dine to the accompaniment of his victim's groans should not complain if during a rite his daughter gets kidnapped or his son's throat is slit. Activity. What message is Young trying to convey here? Whom does he mean when he speaks of slaves? Who is he criticizing? What dangers does he sense in the situation of 1787? Young is trying to convey here that during the riots, like at first he's talking about those people who decide to be served, and waited upon by slaves. They ill treat slaves, they must be aware that by doing so they are placing their property and the life in a situation which is very different from that they would be in if they had chosen the services of free and well treated men. And he who chooses to dine to the accompaniment of his victim's groans should not complain if during a rite his daughter gets kidnapped or his son's throat is slit. This is what he's trying to convey here. Basically he's trying to say that that all the problems, all the pain, all the misery, all the situation in which all those people who work for the Nobel, the those people who take, like if you go back, if you look at this, the first state, the second state, and the third state, peasants, yeah, peasants were obliged to render services to the lord, to work in his house and fields, to serve in the army, or to participate in building roads. So peasants made up about 90% of the population. They, these peasants, small peasants, landless laborers, servants, all the part of the third state. Not all the part, like all of them were part of the third state, but third state also constituted of those people who were rich. So those people, here Young is talking about them, was living in this misery or who are being ill treated, who are basically slaves, who don't have the, who are not free basically, who are doing this because they have to, because they can not, they don't have the power to stop it. He is criticizing all those slaves here. All, sorry, he is criticizing, sorry, not all the slaves. He is criticizing all those people who have kept slaves, who have mistreated slaves. what dangers does he sense in the situation of 1787? He senses that during the riots in 1787, there, so those people who kept slaves, who ill-treated slaves, their daughter or their son can be damaged, can be daughters can be kidnapped, or their son's throat can be slit. That is, their kids can face violence. The violence can come to their kids, can reach their kids. The outbreak of the revolution. Louis XVI had to increase taxes for reasons you have learned in the previous section. How do you think he could have gone about? How do you think he could have gone about doing this? Let's search its meaning. Yeah, it's very very important that we search everything. We may not know everything, but we must search about it. What is it? Let's search. Here, basically, I'm confused about the meaning, what he's trying to say. How do you think he could have gone about doing this? How do you think he could have gone about doing this? I'm searching this on Grok. We must use AI to search whatever problems we have in anything. Explain its meaning. Let's go with group for thinking. Thinking is important here. It will take some time, but I think all of you must use it extensively to search and research and know about everything that you can think of in the studies, in health, in diet, in everything. How do you think you could have gone about doing this? Explain its meaning. One thing that, yeah, obviously in the question is that they are asking how do you think, so how do I think, like they want to know our opinion on how Louis XVI could have gone about doing this. I think the question states that what could he have done different, maybe, or maybe I'm wrong. Let's see what the solution will be out, when the solution will be out. It's taking some time because obviously I've used the thinking part, the thinking option, and the thinking option, it takes some time, but then if you use the fast option, then it may come incorrect, that I've checked previously. So yeah, I think it is wrong. I think here the AI can consider something as completely different from the previous chat. So let's explain again of what I'm trying to say. Explain the meaning of the previous question. Explain the meaning of the question. How do you think he would have gone about doing this? Most probably they want to ask that what could he have done different? Most probably, which I think, what I think he could have done different was he could have at first talked about this to everybody, like what is happening, explained the reason why he's increasing taxes to everybody. That is one of the things that he must have done. And then he could have been generous. He must have allowed people to live better. He must have allowed people, like the prices increasing. He must have talked to people about it. He must have increased the wages, made sure that everyone was having food. Yeah, most probably that is what it is, because it is written that this is asking for a speculation or reasoned hypothesis about the possible methods, strategies, or approach that a specific male person he might have used to accomplish a particular task, action, or goal. This. So here he is Louis 16, and this is increase taxes. In France of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of the States General, which would then pass his proposals for new taxes. The States General was a political body to which the three states sent their representatives. However, the monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting of this body. The last time it was done was in 1614. On 5 May 1789, Louis XVI called together an assembly of the States General to pass proposals for new taxes. A resplendent hall in Versailles was prepared to host the delegates. Let's search the meaning of resplendent. I think all of us, if will search the meaning, will know better.
Resplendent.
Resplendent. That's the pronunciation of it. Shining brilliantly, characterized by glowing splendor. That means looking good, most probably. But yeah, one can use it as it is because obviously it was in a hall, so it can glow, right? Let's search again. Yeah, shining brilliantly, most probably. Yeah. So resplendent hall, the hall shining brilliantly. That is shining a lot. The first and second estates sent 300 representatives each, which were seated in rows facing each other on two sides, while the 600 members of the third estate had to stand at the back. The third estate was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. Peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly. However, their grievances and demands were listed in some 40,000 letters, which the representatives had brought with them. Voting in the States General in the past had been conducted according to the principle that each state had one vote. This time too, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice, but members of the third estate demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. This was one of the democratic principles put forward by philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. When the king rejected this proposal, members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. The representatives of the third estate viewed themselves as the spokesmen for the whole French nation. On 20 June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. They declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. They were led by Mirabeau and Abbé Sieyès. Mirabeau was born in a noble family but was convinced of the need to do away with his society of feudal privilege. He brought out a journal and delivered powerful speeches to the crowds assembled at Versailles. Some important dates. 1774, Louis XVI becomes King of France, faces empty treasury and growing discontent within society of the old regime. 1789, convocation of the States General, Third State forms National Assembly, the Bastille is stormed, peasant revolts in the countryside. 1791, a constitution is framed to limit the powers of the king and to guarantee basic rights to all human beings. 1792 to 93, France becomes a republic, the king is beheaded, overthrow of the Jacobin Republic, a dictator rules France. 1804, Napoleon becomes Emperor of France, annexes large parts of Europe. 1815, Napoleon defeated at Waterloo. Activity. Representatives of the third estate take the oath, raising their arms in the direction of Bailey, the president of the assembly, standing on a table in the center. Do you think that during the actual event Bailey would have stood with his back to the assembled deputies? What could have been David's intention in placing Bailey the way he has done? Figure 5. The tennis court oath. The preparatory sketch for a large painting by Jacques Louis David. The painting was intended to be hung in the National Assembly. Representatives of the third state take the oath, raising their arms in the direction of Bailey, the president of the assembly, standing on a table in the center. Do you think that during the actual event Bailey would have stood is with his back to the assembled deputies? What could have been David's intention in placing Bailey the way he has done? Well, most probably, at first, one has to know that was Bailey a part of these people? The president of the assembly. Here, if you go with assembly, then yeah, it sounds like if their assembly, he was leading it, Let's go again and let's search the name of Bailey. You have to revise, you have to seek, we have to know. That is the thing that I'm here to tell you and learn myself. Yeah, most probably because they declared themselves the National Assembly. It is written that representatives of the third state viewed themselves as a spokesman for the whole French nation. On 20 June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. They declared themselves a National Assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. So here, as they declared themselves a National Assembly. So the president of the assembly is most probably uh, they're the part of them, I think. But let me check the previous one because they were also an assembly when the Louis XVI called it. Louis XVI called together an assembly of the States General to pass proposals for new taxes. A resplendent hall in Versailles was prepared to host the delegates. The first and second states sent 300 representatives each. So basically, let me read it again. Louis XVI had to increase taxes for reasons you have learnt in the previous section. How do you think he could have gone about doing this? In the France of the old regime, the monarch did not have the power to impose taxes according to his will alone. Rather, he had to call a meeting of the States General, which would then pass his proposals for new taxes. The States General was a political body to which the three states sent their representatives. However, the monarch alone could decide when to call a meeting of this body. The last time it was done was in 1614. On 5 May 1789, Louis XVI called together an assembly of the States General to pass proposals for new taxes. A splendid hall in Versailles was prepared to host the delegates. The first and second states sent 300 representatives each, which presided in rows facing each other on two sides, while the 600 members of the third state had to stand at the back. The third state was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. Peasants, artisans, and women were denied entry to the assembly. However, their grievances and demands were listed in some 40,000 letters which the representatives had brought with them. Voting in the States General in the past had been conducted according to the principle that each state had one vote. This time to Louis that the one so first, second, and third state each state had one vote. This time to Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice, but members of the third estate demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. So here, it's not like assembly. Sorry, it's not like one state has one vote, but the whole assembly, everyone in there, each member would have one vote. This was one of the democratic principles put forward by philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. When the king rejected this proposal, members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. The representatives of the third estate viewed themselves as a spokesman for the whole French nation. On 20 June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. They declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. They were led by Mirabeau and Abbé Sieyès. Mirabeau was born in a noble family, but was convinced of the need to do away with a society of feudal privilege. He brought out a journal and delivered powerful speeches to the crowds assembled at Versailles. Abbasius, originally a priest, wrote an influential pamphlet called "What is the Third Estate?" I guess we will find out about it later. But most probably, what here Bailey, the person who is the president of the assembly, is standing on a table in the center. I think it is trying to mean that is everyone is equal, So as he's the president, because he's the president, that is why he is, and that too he's democratic, It is like he's elected, So as he's elected, so he can show their back to them, stand with his back to the assembled deputies, because he's the president who has been elected, most probably, which I think is the case here. That is why, or maybe he isn't, maybe it's a lie, But what here it is trying to say from the painting, it is that what it's trying to say from the painting is that, most probably it is that it is been it has been it is the intention of David here, it is that the president, is powerful, or maybe or maybe David was thinking that as Bailey can also think like this, that he can face others with his back, because he may think that he's uh, the ruler of them, like Louis 16 and all the people before, those who used to treat slaves, like used to have slaves and used to not care about them, can also, or used to ill treat selves, can also think like this, used to think like this, sorry, think like thought like this. So Bailey, after becoming the president, or while being the president, may also have thoughts like this, So here it is, the Davy is trying to find the resemblance of a powerful person, authoritative person like Bailey, and those people who had that authority, like all the noblemen, all the first, second estate people, While the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting a constitution, the rest of France seethed with turmoil. Seethe, let's find out the meaning of seethe. Pronunciation as well as meaning. Seethe.
Seethe.
Seether. Seether. Seether.
Seethe. 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 Seethe.
What the hell?
Verb.
Let's go back. Find out again. We will search again and again till we know what we want to know.
Seethe.
Let's increase the volume for clear distinction.
Seethe. Seethe.
Seether. So seethe. So it's seethe. Seether. Seethed. Or it can be seethed, Seethed. For clear distinction. Turmoil. So let's search turmoil. Turmoil seems
Turmoil.
turmoil. A state or a state or condition of extreme confusion, agitation, or commotion. A severe winter had meant a bad harvest. The price of bread rose. Often bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women stormed into the shops. At the same time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14 July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. New words here. Manor is an estate consisting of the lord's lands and his mansion. An estate consisting of the lord's lands and his mansion. An state consisting, see, that's why I'm saying that NCRT has been written so badly. An estate consisting of the lord's lands and his mansion. The lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. One thing that I know, that if you want to write in exams, you gotta remember it, and for that you gotta revise it. But obviously, you can do research on finding the better way to remember or revise it, which you can use AI for it. Obviously, you must use AI for it, which will help you to understand what it actually means. Let's say a camel. What is the actual camel? So it will help you know that. Caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts seized hoes and pitchforks and attacked chariots. Let's search about this. Chariots. Chariots.
Chateaus.
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 Chateaus. It is chateaus. A feudal castle or fortress in France, most probably. Chateaus. What is a chateaus? Plural. Chateaus. Castle or stately residence belonging to a king or a nobleman. They looted the hoarded grain and burned down documents containing records of manorial dues. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. Faced with the power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his powers would from now on be checked by constitution. On the night of 4th August 1789, the Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. Members of the clergy too were forced to give their privileges. Tithes were abolished and lands owned by the church were confiscated. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. As you can see that I have to go through this ASAP, so you may search the pronunciation or Merriam-Webster again and again to revise so that you can remember. Here you can see the figure 6, the spread of the great fear. The map shows how bands of peasants spread from one point to another. Let's see this further. The regions not affected by the great fear are in green, as you can see. Alsace, Brest, areas of agrarian revolt early 1789 are in this color, which you can see. I'm not remembering the name of the color. Epicenters of main panic movements are in black dots covered by yellow. The spread of the great fear, it is written, shown with the arrow, that from where it spread to where. So the epicenters of the main panic movements, from there it spread, most probably. Most probably not. I mean, mostly from there. France becomes a constitutional monarchy. The National Assembly completed the draft of the constitution in 1791. Its main object was to limit the powers of the monarch. These powers, instead of being concentrated in the hands of one person, were now separated and assigned to different institutions: the legislature, executive, and judiciary. This made France a constitutional monarchy. Figure 7 explains how the new political system worked. Figure 7, the political system under the Constitution of 1791. Judiciary. Active citizens entitled to vote, about 4 million of a population of 28 million. Passive citizens, no voting rights, about 3 million men, women, children, and youth below 25. So the active citizens will vote for choosing the judge, which will be a part of judiciary, and they will also vote for electors, which will be 50,000 men, which will vote for National Assembly, which will be of 1745 members, and both National Assembly and electors will be a part of legislature, I think. And National Assembly will control the king, which is the part of the executive, and as well as control the ministers, which is also part of the executive. King will have the veto on National Assembly, and national, which is a part of the legislature. The Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make laws in the National Assembly, which was directly elected. That is citizens voted for a group of electors who in turn choose the assembly. Not all citizens, however, had the right to vote. Only men above 25 years of age who had paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of a laborer's wage were given the status of active citizens, that is, they were entitled to vote. The remaining men and all women were classed as passive citizens. To qualify as an elector and then as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. Figure 8. Figure 8. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, painted by the artist Le Barbier in 1790. The figure on the right represents France, and the figure on the left symbolizes the law. Declaration. It's all in French. The Constitution began with a declaration of the rights of a man and citizen. Rights such as the right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law were established as natural and inalienable rights, that is, they belong to each human being by birth and could not be taken away. It was the duty of the state to protect each citizen's natural rights. Source B. The revolutionary journalist Jean-Paul Marat commented on in his newspaper L'Ami du People, the friend of the people in English, on the constitution drafted by the National Assembly. The task of representing the people has been given to the rich. The lot of the poor and oppressed will never be improved by peaceful means alone. Here we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law. Yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. Source and extract from the newspaper Alamity People. So here he is trying to say that when they manage to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. Well, it makes sense though. And when they manage to cast off the yoke of the aristocrat, let's search the meaning of yoke. What does it mean?
Yoke.
Yoke. It is taking some time to move. An oppressive agency. An oppressive agency. Cast off. Lose. Alright. When they manage to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, the slaves, right? They will do the same to the other owners of wealth. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats. Well, I'm not getting it quite, what it is trying to say. But I'm here trying to say that when they have managed, here it is. Maybe to people, I think, as the people agree to obey them. Yeah. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. Well, I'm not quite getting, but what I think it is like when the slaves, like, as the rights were given to everybody, so they were free from slavery, so the cast off happened of the yoke of the aristocrats, that means they were they were cast off from the slavery, that is the yoke, that slavery represents yoke here. Sorry, yoke represents slavery here. They will do the same to the other arms of wealth. So here it is trying to say that that it will expand, like the slaves were free now from the aristocrats, from those people whose slaves they were now, because after the rights, after people France became a constitutional monarchy, they are free now. The slaves are free. So this will happen to all the people, all the owners of wealth who have kept slaves. Their slaves will also be free. Most probably, this is what it's trying to say. Source C. The Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Men, the first, men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Second, the aim of every political association is the preservation of the natural and inalienable rights of man. These are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Third, the source of all sovereignty resides in the nation. No group or individual may exercise authority that does not come from the people. Fourth, liberty consists of the power to do whatever is not injurious to others. Fifth, the law has the right to forbid only actions that are injurious to society. Sixth, the law is the expression of the general will. All citizens have the right to participate in its formation personally or through their representatives. All citizens are equal before it. 7. No man may be accused, arrested, or detained except in cases determined by the law. 11. Every citizen may speak, write, and print freely. He must take responsibility for the abuse of such liberty in cases determined by the law. 12. For the maintenance of the public force and for the expenses of administration, a common tax is indispensable. It must be assessed equally on all citizens in proportion to their means. 17. Since property is a sacred and inviolable right, no one may be deprived of it unless a legally established public necessity requires it. In that case, a just compensation must be given in advance. Reading political symbols. Let me check again if I have left anything, but no, I haven't. Reading political symbols. The majority of men and women in the 18th century could not read or write, so images and symbols were frequently used instead of printed words to communicate important ideas. The painting by Lee Barbier, Figure 8, uses many such symbols to convey the content of the Declaration of Rights. Let us try to read these symbols. The broken chain. Chains were used to fetter slaves. A broken chain stands for the act of becoming free. Let's search the meaning of fetter. Most probably it is like to capture. Fetter.
Fetter. Fetter. Fetter.
Fetter. A chain or shackle for the feet. Most probably that. Fetter slaves. No, that definition is wrong. Something that confines, yeah. That is also the same thing. To put fetters on. Most probably it is, like to fetter, like to capture or restrain them from movement, stop slaves from movement, A broken chain stand for the act of becoming free. The bundle of frauds or faces. Let's search the meaning of faces. What does faces mean? A bundle of frauds, and among them an axe with projecting blade borne before ancient Roman magistrates as a badge of authority. This is what it is, The picture, as you can see. The bundle of rods or faces. One rod can be easily broken, but not an entire bundle. Strength lies in unity. That's true. The eye within a triangle radiating light. The all seeing eye stands for knowledge, The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. Scepter, symbol of royal power. Snake batting its tail to form a ring. Symbol of eternity. A ring has neither beginning nor end. Red Frisian cap worn by a slave upon becoming free. Blue, white, red, the national colors of France. The winged movement, personification of the law tablet. The law is the same for all, and all are equal before it. Activity. Identify the symbols in box 1 which stand for liberty, equality, and fraternity. Liberty. Equality, I think the law tablet stands for equality. Liberty. Let's search the meaning of liberty, but most probably it's the chain, broken chain one. Yeah, the broken chain stands for liberty and fraternity. Let's search about this. Yeah, here we go. A group of people associated or formally organized for a common purpose, interest, or pleasure. So here, the red Phrygian cap worn by a slave upon becoming free. It is the thing that is associated with a group of people, that is slaves. So fraternity, I think red Phrygian cap. Explain the meaning of the painting of the Declaration of Rights and of Man and a Citizen figure by reading only the symbols. Alright, here we see. The first thing that we can see is that there is the national colors of France. That I think it is trying to say that this whole picture is about France. And then we can see that there is the eye in a triangle radiating light. The all-seeing eye stands for knowledge. The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. And then there is a winged woman, which is the personification of the law. And then there comes the law tablet. The law is the same for all, and all are equal before it. And the living woman is pointing towards the law tablet. That means that the personification of the law, or maybe you can say that the law basically here is equal for all, the same for all, and all are equal before it. That is what it is trying to say. Or the law is itself saying that what it is, it is equal before all, it is the same for all, and all that is written in that law tablet. And the eye within a triangle radiating light, the all seeing eye stands for knowledge. The rays of the sun will drive away the clouds of ignorance. Here basically it is trying to say that this all this law tablet, whatever it is written in the law, it will, this knowledge of law, this will drive away the clouds of ignorance. Compare the political rights which the Constitution of 1791 gave to the citizens with Articles 1 and 6 of the Declaration. Source C. Compare the political rights which the Constitution of 1791 gave to the citizens with Articles 1 and 6 of the Declaration. Political rights, okay, fine. Are the two documents consistent? Do the two documents convey the same idea? 1 and 6. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Law is the expression of the general will. All citizens have the right to participate in its formation personally or through their representatives. All citizens are equal before it. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Law is the expression of the general will. Is all citizens have the right to participate in its formation personally or through their representatives. All citizens are equal before it. I don't think that they consider this, they convey the same idea, because the article 1 is saying that men are born and remain free and equal in rights, like all men have equal rights, all men are free. Obviously all men are born, so, and then they remain free. Law is the expression of the general will. All citizens have the right to participate in its formation, that is, all the citizens must participate to form the law. And here the citizens are obviously men, who can, or we can say active citizens are men, because only they can elect their representatives, all citizens are equal before it. I think, yeah, it violates it, because if you see this, that many citizens are passive, if you see that many citizens are passive, so if they are remain born and remain free and equal in rights, then those passive citizens must also be able to participate in the formation of the law personally or through their representatives, because all citizens are equal before it, but passive citizens cannot elect the people to, cannot elect their representatives, cannot vote because they cannot vote. So they violate each other, they don't convey the same idea, which groups of French society would have gained which from the constitution of 1791, which groups of French society would have gained from the constitution of 1791, which groups would have had reason to be dissatisfied, what developments does Marat source be anticipate in the future. Yet the task of representing the people has been given to the rich. The lot of the poor and oppressed will never be improved by peaceful means alone. Here we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law. Yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. Yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them, and when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. The Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make laws in the National Assembly, which was indirectly elected. That is, citizens voted for a group of electors who in turn chose the assembly. Not all citizens, however, had the right to vote. Only men above 25 years of age who had paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of laborers' wage were given the status of active citizens. That is, they were entitled to vote. To qualify as an elector and then as a member of the assembly, a man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. Basically, active citizens would vote, but they can obviously only vote for those people who have the highest bracket of taxpayers, because they can only be the part of electors and National Assembly. So here obviously the wealth influences the law. One thing that the peasants and the small peasants and the laborers and the slaves basically would have gained from this. All of the all slaves who were part of the third estate, not all third estate were slaves, but all slaves were part of the third estate, they would have gained freedom because they were free from all the slavery. So they have gained the most, and they also had the reason to be dissatisfied, because they were, because they were unable to, because as they are poor, so they are unable to choose, they are unable to be part of active citizen, or be themselves to call, they are unable to be called active citizens, or they are unable to become active citizens, hence they are unable to vote for electors who in turn will vote for national assembly. So that is the one thing that is here. So they would be the most, they had reason to be dissatisfied for sure. Well, on the other hand, those people who kept slaves, like those people who were privileged, they may also be dissatisfied because their privileges are taken away. Here, Marat, the in source P, what I think I missed in the starting was that at first he is criticizing the fact or telling the fact in general that the task of representing the people has been given to the rich, which is obviously visible. The lot of the poor and oppressed will never be proof of peaceful means alone. Here we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law, yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. So here Marat is saying that what happened with the aristocrats, those people who kept slaves, because the people, uh, they became free, so when the people, will most probably by violent means, they will, they have the chance, to leave the slavery for to the other owners of wealth. And here the slavery is like this, it is like the rich can only be electors or the part of the national assembly, so this is kind of a slavery to the poor people who cannot be a part of it. So they will also, Marat is saying that it will happen that those people, by violent means will be free of the slavery, and also which by that, which means that they will also be able to choose electors. They will also be able to be part of active citizens, become a part of active citizens. They will also be able to become electors, and they will also be able to choose national assembly people, and they will also be able to be a part of national assembly. That is what Marat is saying, that the slavery here, which shifted from which shifted now to slavery to vote, they cannot vote, so they are basically slaves, because the rich will make the law for them, so they are slaves in a way. So that is what it is being talked about in by Marat in source B. Imagine the impact of the events in France on neighboring countries such as Prussia, Austria-Hungary, or Spain, all of which were absolute monarchies. How the kings, traders, peasants, nobles, or members of the clergy here they have reacted to the news of what was happening in France. I think the kings would have been scared, because what happened would have caused problems or death for the king. Traders would have thought that what happened must not have what happened can what happened was right. They could have thought that, I think they would have reacted positively, but as they have, many rich people had to flee, from France after the protests became violent, of after the crowd became violent, so there is a chance that they would also not like it. Peasants would have loved it because they became free of slavery, so they would have reacted positively to it. Nobles or members of the clergy would not have liked it at all because they were the people who were keeping slaves and they were the people against whom the slaves or the people got angry, so they would not have liked it at all, you know, because obviously many people have to had to flee France after that. France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. The situation in France continued to be tense during the following years. Although Louis XVI had signed the constitution, he entered into secret negotiations with the King of Prussia. Members of other neighboring countries too were worried by the developments in France and made plans to send troops to put down the events that had been taking place there since the summer of 1789. Before this could happen, the National Assembly voted in April 1792 to declare war against Prussia and Austria. Thousands of volunteers thronged from the provinces to join the army. They saw this as a war of the people against kings and aristocracies all over Europe. Among the patriotic songs they sang was the Marseillaise, composed by the poet Roget de Lisle. It was sung for the first time by volunteers from Marseilles as they marched into Paris and so got its name. The, Mars- the Marseillaise is now the national anthem of France. The Revolutionary Wars brought losses and economic difficulties to the people while the men were away fighting at the front. Women were left to cope with the tasks of earning a living and looking after their families. Large sections of the population were convinced that the revolution had to be carried further, as the Constitution of 1791 gave political rights only to the richer sections of the society. Political clubs became an important rallying point for people who wished to discuss government policies and plan their own forms of action. The most successful of these clubs was that of the Jacobins, which got its name from the former convent of Saint Jacob in Paris. Women too, who had been active throughout this period, formed their own clubs. Section 4 of this chapter will tell you more about their activities and demands. The members of the Jacobin Club belonged mainly to the less prosperous sections of society. They included small shopkeepers, artisans such as shoemakers, pastry cooks, watchmakers, printers, as well as servants and daily wage workers. Their leader was Maximilian Robespierre. A large group among the Jacobins decided to start wearing long striped trousers similar to those worn by dock workers. This was to set themselves apart from the fashionable sections of society, especially nobles who wore knee breeches. It was a way of proclaiming the end of the power wielded by the wearers of knee breeches. These Jacobins came to be known as the sans-culottes, literally meaning those without knee breeches. Sans-culottes men were men wore in addition the red cap that symbolized liberty. Women, however, were not allowed to do so. In Fig 9, you can see a sans-culottes couple. New words convent, building belonging to a community devoted to a religious life. In the summer of 1792, the Jacobins planned an insurrection of a large number of Parisians who were angered by the short supplies and high prices of food. That's the meaning of insurrection. Insurrection, an act or instance of revolting against civil authority or an established government. On the morning of August 16, they stormed the palace of the Tuileries, massacred the king's guards, and held the king himself as a hostage for several hours. Later, the assembly voted to imprison the royal family. Elections were held. From now on, all men of 21 years and above, regardless of wealth, got the right to vote. The newly elected assembly was called the Convention. On 21st September 1792, it abolished the monarchy and declared France a republic. As you know, a republic is a form of government where the people elect the government, including the head of the government. There is no hereditary monarchy. You can try and about find out about some other countries that are republics and investigate when and how they became so. Louis XVI was sentenced to death by court on the charge of treason, new words treason, betrayal of one's country or government. On 21 January 1793, he was executed publicly at the Place de la Concorde. The Queen Mary Antoinette met with the same fate shortly after. Figure 10. Nanine Valine Liberty. This is one of the rare paintings by a woman artist. The revolutionary events made it possible for women to train with established painters and to exhibit their works in the Salon, which was an exhibition held every 2 years. The painting is a female allegory of liberty, that is, the female form symbolizes the idea of freedom. Activity. Look carefully at the painting and identify the objects which are political symbols you saw in box 1. Broken chain, red cap, fasces, charter of the Declaration of Rights. The pyramid stands for equality, often represented by a triangle. Use the symbols to interpret the painting. Describe your impressions of the female figure of liberty. One thing that I'm able to see is the red frag in the cap worn by slave upon becoming free. So the women want to be free or are free. That is the one thing that I'm able to see. Is there anything else? I doubt there is anything else than that. Describe your impressions of the female figure of liberty. Let's search the meaning of what it means. Describe your impression of the female figure of liberty. What does this question mean? Describe your impression. I think one thing that I want to know here is the impression meaning of it. Like, does it want to know that how does it look like? Describe your impression of the female figure. What is this question? This is direct request to explain and unpack the first part. Although this particular impression invites not just a factual description but a thoughtful, evocative response. How she appears visually, symbolically, or emotionally. Okay, fine. Let me see this. The face seems a bit sad. The face seems a bit sad. The face seems a bit sad. That's for sure. The female here is seeking equality, which is obviously the pyramid is representing that. So she is seeking for equality because how they have faced or how they have lived like slaves. So they want freedom. That is what they want to see. I think if you will read through the chapter more and more, then you will be able to grasp better and you will be able to write better and write a lot about what is in the chapter related to women, females, how they are treated, and how they seek the freedom. But if it is talking about only this figure, then this is all I have to say. That she is sad and she is seeking for liberty, she is seeking for freedom, which is represented by the pyramid. And she wants to become free, which is also represented by the red Phrygian cap. Like she's waiting for the time that she's not waiting. Has already got one in the picture, so she's uplifting that, you know. Or maybe she wants to become free, so that is why she is kept above something like raw. And I think that she wants to fight to achieve it. She wants to fight to figure that gap, you know, to attack those who will stop him from creating that, and to from becoming free, you know. where he was gluttony his enemies, which was senseless because it they must not be scared. Anyone must not be scared. That is the thought of this Mullins was that anyone must not be scared. Everyone must be happy and everyone must get justice and everyone must be equal. Instead of Robespierre thought that the enemies of liberty through terror, which was wrong, which was illogical, because liberty, that is what he was thinking, which I think is illogical, but that must not be in the answer. So basically, Robespierre was thinking that he was using terror to curb the enemies of liberty, and he thought that terror is nothing but justice. He was thinking of annihilating the enemies of the republic. Otherwise, we he thought that the people of the republic will die or get destroyed, and he thought that in a time of revolution, a democratic government may rely on terror. And Robespierre pursued his policies relentlessly. Like he must have used reason, but he was relentless. And he followed a policy of severe control and punishment. Those people whom he saw as enemies were guillotined, arrested, imprisoned. That was not the practice of liberty or justice or equality, because you're thinking, or how do you see somebody, that must not define it. So the understand how does Robespierre understand the use of state force? See, the 3.1 section and the source deed, the both of them can be used to understand or find out the answer of this, that how both of them used to understand the use of state force. Robespierre followed a policy of severe control and punishment. Obviously, it is written all those whom he saw as being enemies of the republic, ex-nobles and clergy members of other political parties, even members of his own party who did not agree with his methods, were arrested, imprisoned, and then tried by a revolutionary tribunal. If the court found them guilty, they were guillotined. All right, so this is how you use the state force, you know, and he also thought that obviously all that I talked about in source D. I think the previous answer that I gave was also like it was an extension, like compared the views of Desmoulins and Robespierre. How does each one understand the use of state force? So all the force that the Desmoulins think that he was wrong, he was senseless. That part it can be taken up, and all the things that I said before can be taken of how the Robespierre used the power, the state force, that can be taken and that can be written along with. That is the first question's answer. And I think that is the first question. From compare the views of Desmoulins and Robespierre, how does each one understand the use of state force? I think it is the one. What does Robespierre mean by the war of liberty against tyranny? By the war of liberty against tyranny. To curb the enemies of liberty through terror is the right of the founder of the republic. How does this small what does Robespierre mean by the war of liberty against tyranny? He meant that we must annihilate the enemies of the Republic at home and abroad, or else we shall perish. By the wall of liberty against tyranny, to establish and consolidate democracy, to achieve the peaceful rule of constitutional laws, we must first finish the war of liberty against tyranny. Okay, so that is not a part of it, a part of the answer. We must annihilate the enemies of the republic at home and abroad, or else we shall perish. That is the first part. In the time of revolution, a democratic government may rely on terror. Terror is nothing but justice, swift, severe, and inflexible, and is used to meet the most urgent needs of the fatherland. To curb the enemies of liberty through terror is the right of the founder of the republic. So it starts from the we must annihilate, and it goes till Paris, and in time of revolution, no, not from there, and then to curb the enemies of liberty through terror is the right of the founder of the republic. That is what I think it meant, Robespierre meant. Or maybe he used to think that liberty can only be possible by fighting against those people whom he perceived as tyrants. That can also be think, can also be thought about. But I think that is whose expansion I would say is that we must annihilate the enemies of the republic at home and abroad, or else we shall perish. Perish. In time of revolution, a democratic government may rely on terror. Terror is nothing but justice, swift, severe, and flexible, and used to meet the most urgent needs of the fatherland. Fatherland to curb the enemies of the liberty through terror is the right of the founder of the republic. This is how I see it. How does Desmoulins perceive liberty? Liberty is, according to Desmoulins, liberty is happiness, reason, equality, justice. It is a declaration of rights. Refer once more to source C. Okay. The Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. The aim of every political association is the preservation of the natural and inalienable rights of man. These are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Okay. I don't think that is going to be the part of what the previous question. What did the constitutional laws on the rights of individuals lay down? Discuss your views on the subject in class. What did the constitutional laws on the rights of individuals lay down? Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. That's the first thing. Inalienable main rights of man, that are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Let's proceed. Liberty consists of the power to do whatever is not injurious to others. The law has the right to forbid only actions that are injurious to society. All citizens have the right to participate in the formation of law, personally or through their representatives. All citizens are equal before it. No man may be accused, arrested, or detained except in cases determined by the law. Every citizen may speak, write, and print freely, but he must take responsibility for the abuse of such liberty in cases determined by the law. So, what I'm able to perceive of this is discuss your views on the subject in class. Men are born and remain free and equal rights. I totally agree with this. The aim of every political association, yeah, the inalienable rights of man are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Totally agree with it. Because liberty is important for any person to do what he wants to do. that is not injurious to others, not harmful to others. Property is obviously important for one's livelihood, for one's lifespan, for one's life possibility. So that is also important. Security is obviously important to for one's life possibility. Resistance to oppression for the same reason, so that the person will not be exploited. Liberty consists of the power to do whatever is not injurious to others. Totally true. Because if you are violating doing what is injurious to others, then you are basically destroying others' liberty. You are destroying others' freedom, because you are creating their death, or I would say harming them. So that is obviously true, that liberty consists of the power to do whatever is not injurious to others. The law is the right to forbid only actions that are injurious to society, which is completely true. That the law must stop it. Otherwise, anyone can do anything that can be deadly to others. All citizens have the right to participate in the formation of law. Completely agree with it, because personally or through their representatives, all citizens are equal before it. Completely agree. No man may be accused, arrested, or detained except in cases determined by the law. Completely agree, because if not, then this rule may be violated and anyone can be accused, arrested, or detained, which must not happen. Every citizen may speak, write, and print freely. He must take responsibility for the abuse of such liberty in cases determined by the law. Totally agree with it, because I disagree with this. I think speaking, writing, and printing must be completely free. It must not be determined by the law. I think anyone must be allowed to write, speak, or print whatever he wants, because if we take action on one person, then the law may be twisted to take action on many people that may not need it, or may not required, that may not be needed. So that is the one thing which I disagree with, that it must be every citizen must be able to speak, write, and print freely, irrespective, and no need to take any action against it by the law, so that the even the uh, reasonable actions can be twisted and tweaked to reach people who don't need such actions, whose works don't need such actions. So it's best to keep the law away from writing, speaking, and printing. I think this is the property is a sacred and inviolable right. No one may be deprived of it. That I totally agree with. Unless a legally established public necessity requires it, in that case, a just compensation must be given in advance. Completely agree with it. I think here one can think of it like this, that I think it is wrong. I think everyone must have it. Yeah, but here it is saying that unless and until they may not have it, then they can give compensation. So yeah, that is totally agree with. Figure 11. The revolutionary government sought to mobilize the loyalty of its subjects through various means. One of them was the staging of festivals like this one. Symbols from civilizations of ancient Greece and Rome were used to convey the aura of a hallowed history. The pavilion on the raised platform in the middle, carried by classical columns, were made of perishable material that could be dismantled. Describe the groups of people, their clothes, their roles, and actions. What impression of a revolutionary festival does this image convey? There are many people who look like they are soldiers. They have weapons with them, and then I'm able to see some kids along with a female, most probably their mother, because of the way they were drawn, and there is a parade going on, and then they were most probably noblemen and clergy standing on the outside of the military or militia looking people, as well as in the inside of the same that there is military and militia, and then there are people up above a platform. I think they are nobles, look like nobles or clergies, and there are many people in horse riding on horses. The people on the platform are most likely singing or talking about something. Is to convey the aura of hallowed history. What does mean the aura of hallowed history? Let me search this. The aura of a hallowed history. The aura of a hallowed history meaning. I think we must keep searching about things till we find it. What we want to know or what we must know. Because if we stop, then we won't be able to find it, of course, because that hasn't generally happened, that something just comes into our mind, we seek through it through memory, or we seek for it through the universe, so that is how we know things, or we may imagine, but I think imagination is not reality, so we can be sure that what we imagine is true or resembles true. Obviously imagination can never be true, only memory can be true, and what we experience now is true. The phrase "the aura of a hallowed history" refers to the distinctive, evocative atmosphere or impression of reverence, sanctity, and timeless prestige that comes from associating something with a sacred or deeply respected past. Or a subtle surrounding quality or vibe like a glowing or mystical presence that evokes emotional respect. Hallowed, something made holy or revered or consecrated. Hallowed grounds means sacred land. Okay, so it may be a religious one, like the people standing on the pavilion, like the people standing on the pavilion. So as it is written that the revolutionary government sought to mobilize the loyalty of its subjects. So I think that these people are active citizens, obviously, or sorry, these people are the guards of, or the protectors of the elect revolutionary government. So they used to kind of influence them, or with all this festival, so that they can keep the emotions in them, that they what they must do, or how they must defend their government. So that is what it is about, that it is like a parade, it is like to evoke emotions in them, that what their goal is or what they must do, that is to defend the government. A directory rules France. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle class to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote to non propertied sections of society. It provided for two elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory and executive made up of 5 members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the Directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Through all these changes in the form of government, the ideals of freedom, of equality before the law, and of fraternity remained inspiring ideals that motivated political movements in France and the rest of Europe during the following century. You got to revise to basically grasp it. One may be able to grasp all what is in the book in the first reading, but you have to grasp again and again and again to remember it actually, and then to actually write all whatever is written, like what all that relates to that, or basically can be the answer of that in the book. It has no other, you know there is no other way to like replace revision. It is very important. Did women have a revolution? Figure 12: Parisian women on their way to Versailles. This print is one of the many pictorial representations of the events of 5 October 1789, when women marched to Versailles and brought the king back with them to Paris. From the very beginning, women were active participants in the events which brought about so many important changes in French society. They hoped that their involvement would pressurize the revolutionary government to introduce measures to improve their lives. Most women of the third estate had to work for a living. They worked as seamstresses or laundresses, sold flowers, fruits, and vegetables at the market, or were employed as domestic servants in the house of prosperous people. Most women did not have access to education nor job training. Only daughters of nobles or wealthier members of the third estate could study at a convent, after which their families arranged a marriage for them. Working women had also to care for their families, that is, cook, fetch water, queue up for bread, and look after the children. Their wages were lower than those of men. In order to discuss and voice their interests, women started their own political clubs and newspapers. About 60 women's clubs came up in different French cities. The Society of Revolutionary and Republican Women was the most famous of them. One of their main demands was that women enjoy the same political rights as men. Women were disappointed that the Constitution of 1791 reduced them to passive citizens. They demanded the right to vote, to be elected to the assembly, and to hold political office. Only then they felt would their interests be represented in the new government. Activity: describe the persons represented in figure 12, their actions, their postures, the objects they are carrying. Look carefully to see whether all of them come from the same social group. What symbols has the artist included in the image? What do they stand for? Do the actions of the women reflect traditional ideas of how women were expected to behave in public? What do you think? Does the artist sympathize with the women's activities, or is it critical of them? Discuss your views in the class. Describe the persons represented in figure 12, their actions. What I'm able to see is that many females in the back are have holding a weapon in one hand and uplifting it, and there is a female on the most right who is riding on a horse, and the woman just right of the most left is carrying a basket or a drum. Their posture, the posture of all the women is standing of the left, and the most right one is riding on a horse. The objects they're carrying, the all the women in the left are carrying objects that can be used to attack or defend. They look like axe or sword. Some of them are carrying sword. One of the women is carrying one of the women is carrying a picture of two weighing machine. They are carrying a picture of a weighing machine, which most probably tries to show that a woman is equal to a man, which can be on either side of the two baskets that are part of the weighing machine. The woman which is riding a horse is most probably carrying a wheat or a less powerful substance than a sword. Look carefully to see whether all of them come from the same social group. Well, their dresses look almost the same, but the most so yeah, they come from the same social group. But the most right one is carrying a horse, so maybe she is not. Most probably, according to the picture, I think the most right one is the richest, and the left ones are yeah. What symbol of justice is there? The symbol of equality is there. One, I'm able to see red, blue, and white, which most probably represents France in this picture. I think this picture women can also have kings or can decide or can have the power to influence king, by carrying them back to from Paris to Versailles, or carrying them back from Paris, carrying the king back from Paris. They also have the power. They also want the power, to elect the representative as well as influence the government. They stand for symbol. They stand for justice. They stand for equality. They stand for the right to vote. Do the actions of the women reflect traditional ideas of how women were expected to behave in public? No. What do you think? Does the artist sympathize with the women's activities or is he critical of them? I think the artist sympathizes with the women's activities because they were allowed to not vote. They were basically not considered equal to men. So they are the artist sympathizes with the women's activities. I have discussed the views. So, but as I said before, if you will revise the book again and again, then you will be able to form the answer better, and all that is can be a part of the answer. In the early years, the revolutionary government did introduce laws that helped improve the lives of women. Together with the creation of state schools, schooling was made compulsory for all girls. Their fathers could no longer force them into marriage against their will. Marriage was made into contract, entered into freely and registered under civil law. Divorce was made legal and could be applied for by both women and men. Women could now train for jobs, could become artists, or run small businesses. Women's struggle for equal political rights, however, continued. During the reign of terror, the new government issued laws ordering closure of women's clubs and banning their political activities. Many prominent women were arrested and a number of them executed. Women's movements for voting rights and equal wages continued through the next 200 years in many countries of the world. The fight for the vote was carried out through an international suffrage movement during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The example of the political activities of French women during the revolutionary years was kept alive as an inspiring memory. It was finally in 1946 that women in France won the right to vote. I think I have to search for suffrage pronunciation.
Suffrage. Suffrage.
Suffrage. The right of voting. Yeah. The right of voting. Sursi, the life of a revolutionary woman, Olympe de Gaugues, 1748 to 1793. Olympe de Gaugues was one of the most important of the politically active women in revolutionary France. She protested against the constitution and the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen as they excluded women from basic rights that each human being was entitled to. So in 1791, she wrote a Declaration of the Rights of Women and Citizen, which she addressed to the Queen and to the members of the National Assembly, demanding that they act upon it. In 1793, Olympe de Gaugues criticized the Jacobin government for forcibly closing down the women's clubs. She was tried by the National Convention, which charged her with treason. Soon after this, she was executed. Source app. Some of the basic rights set forth in Olympe de Gaugues' Declaration. Woman is born free and remains equal to man in rights. The goal of all political associations is the preservation of the natural rights of women and man. These rights are liberty, property, security, and above all, resistance to oppression. The source of all sovereignty resides in the nation, which is nothing but the union of women and man. For the law should be the expression of the general will. All female and male citizens should have a say, either personally or by their representatives in its formulation. It should be the same for all. All female and male citizens are equally entitled to all honors and public employment according to their abilities and without any other distinction than that of their talents. 5. No woman is an exception. She is accused, arrested, and detained in cases determined by law. Women, like men, obey this rigorous law. Activity. Compare the manifesto drafted by Olympe de Gaugues Source F with the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen Source C. Source C, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. Men are born and remain and free and equal in rights. I think that is true, but in this only men are written, but in that Olympiad the causes one man and male and female are also females or women are also added in it. You have to revise to remember that if you would revise it a lot, then you will be able to actually like quickly try to see the distinction in it. So the first one is better because in this, I won't say better, I would say that Olympe de Gaugues manifesto, women is given equal rights to men, but in the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, woman is not given equal right. The same, it is being added and added and added in the second one. The second right is like, second right is added. The second right is an addition to the second right of the source C, or the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. That's the second one. The third one is also the addition of women in it. The fourth one, the fourth one is the addition of women in the sixth right of man and citizen, sixth point of the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. When we add women in it at the citizen, then we get the third point of the declaration of the third point of the Olympic third point of the Olympe de Gaugues Declaration. Sorry, the fourth point. Yeah, the fourth point of the Olympe de Gaugues. The fifth point here. The fifth point here. The fifth point of Olympo is the addition of female in the seventh point of the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. So this is the comparison. Source G, figure 13. Let's see figure 13 first. Woman queuing up at a bakery. I think in this picture, a man already has a bakery. I guess. Sorry, he has a product. No, for which the women are lining up. This is what I'm able to see in the picture. Activity. Imagine yourself to be one of the women in Fig 13. Formulate a response to the arguments put forward by Somet Source G. In 1796, the Jacobin politician Somet sought to justify the closure of women's clubs on the following grounds. Has nature entrusted domestic duties to men? Has she given us breasts to nurture babies? No. She said to man, be human, hunting, agriculture, political duties, that is your kingdom. She said to woman, be woman, the things of the household, the sweet duties of motherhood. Those are your tasks. Shameless are those women who wish to become men. Have not duties been fairly distributed? I think that it is important, like as in the picture, all women are lining up to get a bread at a bakery, you know, most probably to get a bread, which was a stable diet in France. So it's the duty of the women there is not just to nurture babies, you know, it is also to do all it is also to do this duty, because this duty or this work, like planning up and or queuing up at a bakery, is important for one's survival. That is also important. The same way, you know, it is also important for every female to do all the duties that are important to self, like hunting, like agriculture, like political duties also. So basically, the conclusion is that that is what I would have said, because I'm doing the same thing. I'm fighting for my right. I'm fighting for my food. I'm fighting for my survival. So I'm basically doing what is important for my life. You know, in the same way, what Tomato is saying is for what is Tomato is saying that Tomato is saying that you know he is justifying the closure of women's club. Falling grounds. I think the falling grounds are false, because I must do what is required for me to be alive, you know. And all that includes hunting, agriculture, political duties too. And nature doesn't stop us from doing all this. If it would have stopped us from doing all this, or attacked us or harmed us, then we could have thought of other ways, but that doesn't do it. But it doesn't do so. So it is also our duty to do all that a man does, especially political duty. That would have been my response. The abolition of slavery. One of the most revolutionary social reforms of the Jacobin regime was the abolition of slavery in the French colonies. The colonies on the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and Domingo were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee, but the reluctance of Europeans to go and work in distant and unfamiliar lands meant a shortage of labor on the plantations. So this was met by a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The slave trade began in the 17th century. First, French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to the African coast, where they brought slaves from local chieftains. Branded and shackled, the slaves were packed tightly into ships for the 3 month long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. They were there they were sold to plantation owners. The exploitation of slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes owned their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. Throughout the 18th century, there was little criticism of slavery in France. The National Assembly held long debates about whether the rights of man should be extended to all French subjects, including those in the colonies, but it did not pass any laws, fearing opposition from businessmen whose incomes dependent on the slave trade. It was finally the convention, which is 1794, legislated to free all slaves as in the French overseas possessions. This, however, turned out to be a short term measure. 10 years later, Napoleon reintroduced slavery. Plantation owners understood their freedom as including the right to enslave African Negroes in pursuit of their economic interests. New words Negroes, a term used for indigenous people of Africa south of the Sahara. It is a derogatory term, not in common use any longer. Slavery was finally abolished in French colonies in 1848. Figure 14. The emancipation of slaves. Let's search the emancipation meaning.
Emancipation.
Emancipation. Free from restraint or control or the power of another, that is free from slavery, I think. The emancipation of slaves. This print of 1794 describes the emancipation of slaves. The tricolor banner of top carries the slogan, "The Rights of Man." The inscription below reads, "The freedom of the unfree." A French woman prepares to civilize the African and American Indian slaves by giving them European clothes to wear. Emancipation, the act of freeing. Activity. Record your impressions of this print. Fig 14. Describe the objects lying on the ground. What do they symbolize? What attitudes does the picture express towards non European slaves? There is a gun and there is a sword lying on the ground. They symbolize the force used to turn these slaves, to turn these people into slaves, to turn these African and American Indian slaves into slaves. That attitude the picture expresses towards the non-European slaves is of force, and their thought that and their thinking that they are not as equal to them. That is why they are trying to make them wear European clothes to civilize them, or make, which in turn means to make them as equal to them. But yeah, this is what it is trying to show or express. The revolution in everyday life. Can politics change the clothes people wear, the language they speak? Just a bit. I think I need to increase the this. Yeah. Can politics change the clothes people wear, the language they speak, or the books they read? The years following 1789 in France saw many such changes in the lives of men, women, and children. The revolutionary governments took it upon themselves to pass laws that would translate the ideals of liberty and equality into everyday practice. One important law that came into effect soon after the storming of the Bastille in the summer of 1789 was the abolition of censorship. In the old regime, all written material, cultural activities, books, newspapers, plays could be published or performed only after they have been approved by the censors of the king. Now the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen proclaimed proclaimed freedom of speech and expression to be a natural right. Newspapers, pamphlets, books, and printed pictures flooded the towns of France from where they traveled rapidly into the countryside. They all described and discussed the events and changes taking place in France. Freedom of the press also meant that opposing views of events could be expressed. Each side sought to convince the others of its position through the medium of print. Plays, songs, and festive processions attracted large numbers of people. This was one way they could grasp and identify with ideas such as liberty or justice that political philosophers wrote about at length in texts which only a handful of educated people could read. Activity. Describe the picture in your own words. What are the images that the artist has used to communicate the following ideas? Greed, equality, justice, take over by the state of the assets of the church. Take over by the state of the assets of the church. Figure 15. The patriotic fat reducing press. This anonymous print of 1796 to make the idea of justice tangible. What is tangible? Let's search the meaning of tangible.
Tangible.
The pronunciation is tangible, capable of being perceived especially by the sense of touch. Let's search what could be the appropriate meaning of it. Idea of justice tangible. Okay, fine. Let's do this. Substantially real. Yeah, substantially real, most probably. Describe the picture in your own words. What are the images that the artist used to communicate the following days? Greed, greed. Let me see this. I think the quality of the picture is not so better, so I'm unable to see the what could be the representation of greed. No, equality, justice, take over by the state of the assets, take over by the state of the assets of the church. I'm unable to solve this, being honest with you, because I'm unable to see the picture clearly. The quality, what is falling from the person's neck is I'm unable to see. But if it is money, then it can represent greed. Equality, equality is represented by the law. What is representing the equality here? You know, justice. Let's see all the pictures that were seen earlier, that used to represent words through pictures, or symbols, I would say. This red Phrygian cap worn by a slave upon becoming free, blue, white, red, the national colors of France. The winged woman, the personification of the law. The law tablet, the law is the same for all, and all are equal before it. I was able to see red Phrygian cap, that's for sure. Maybe in his hand it is a red Phrygian cap, it represents equality. No, but then yeah, it represents equality because it's like free from slavery, so it's equality. The red Phrygian cap in the hand of the fat man, justice. Justice. Justice, I'm unable to understand what represents justice here. Yeah, justice, I see. Justice is the two men that they are carrying the religious man away. I think that is justice. Because according to justice, these two men who are taking the fat man away are part of the state. And the takeover of the by the state of the assets of the church is represented by these two men, who are looking away. They represent church. They are part of the church, and they are looking away. So their church, their assets are being taken over by the state, by the people who are taking the basically all the flowing that is happening from the neck is most probably the takeover by the state of the assets are flowing of the church, and to those people who represent as church, they are looking away. That means they lost lost the assets of the church, which is being taken over by the state. And the two people who are taking the fat man away are also representation of that the state is coming to take it over, or taking it over. The state is taking it over. Figure 16, Marat addressing the people. This is a painting by Louis Leopold Boilly. Recall what you have learned about Marat in this chapter. Describe the scene around him. Account for his great popularity. What kinds of reactions would a painting like this produce among viewers in the salon? What I learned about Marat, let me revisit him. What I remember about him, that he was angry, or and he was disappointed also. The revolutionary journalist Jean-Paul Marat commented in the newspaper LMED People, the friend of the people, on the constitution drafted by the National Assembly. The task of representing the people has been given to the rich. The lot of the poor and oppressed will never be improved by peaceful means alone. Here we have absolute proof of how wealth influences the law. Yet laws will last only as long as people agree to obey them. And when they have managed to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other people. So they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. So Marat was an angry person. He was disappointed that the task of representing the people has been given to the rich, but not to the poor and oppressed also. And he thought that it will never happen by peaceful means. And here is and it all of this, that the poor and oppressed are not allowed to represent the people, are only till the people agree to obey it. And when they will manage, and when the slavery, that this declaration of rights of man and citizen hope to implement, when that will be implemented, and then there will be a time, or sooner, all the rights that, or all the laws that prohibit poor and the oppressed from not representing the people will also be casted off, and then they will be able to represent the people. That is what I am able to learn about Marat, and what he thought of, or how he thought of. The scene around him, I recalled it, and yeah, the scene around him is that people are trying to meet him, people are praising him, people want to listen to him, people have holded him high. His great popularity is caused by his thoughts for the poor and the oppressed, his care for the poor and the oppressed, and hence the poor and the oppressed have uplifted him, cheering him, and care about him. This a painting like this would produce hope, energy for the viewers in the salon. They would think that their voices, the voices of the peasants and the oppressed and the slaves and those people who cannot vote, those people who are poor, sorry, there were no slaves, sorry, of those who cannot vote, they can also vote if they follow Marat, if they follow Marat, and Marat can help them achieve that. Or they have to follow Marat. Marat is the guy. Marat is the person with them, for them. Conclusion. In 1894, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries, dispossessing dynasties and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as the protection of private property and a uniform system of weights and measures. Is it weights or is it weights and measures? Let me search it again.
Wait.
Yeah, it's weights. Weights and measures provided by the decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the people, but soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. He was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815. Many of his measures that carried the revolutionary ideas of liberty and modern laws to other parts of Europe had an impact on people long after Napoleon had left. The ideas of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. These spread from France to the rest of Europe during the 19th century, where feudal systems were abolished. Colonized peoples would evoke the idea of freedom from bondage into their movements to create a sovereign nation state. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Rai are two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from revolutionary France. Figure 17, Napoleon crossing the Alps, painting by David. Box 2. Raja Ram Mohan Roy was one of those who was inspired by new ideas that were spreading through Europe at the time. The French Revolution and later the July Revolution excited his imagination. He could think and talk of nothing else when he heard of the July Revolution in France in 1830. On his way to England at Cape Town, he insisted on visiting frigates, warships flying the revolutionary tricolor flag, although he had been temporarily lamed by an accident. Suzoban Sarkar, Notes on the Bengal Renaissance, 1946. Let's search the meaning of lamed.
Lamed. Lamed.
Lamed. Lamed. What does it even mean? Lamed by an accident. Lame. Lame would be better. Not strong is better. To seriously injure a leg or a part of leg. Yeah, this is apt. Temporarily lamed by an accident. It means he injured his leg. Or a part of a leg. Activities. Found out more about any one of the revolutionary figures you read about in this chapter. Write a short biography of this person. Revolutionary figures. I would say go with Marat. But is Napoleon considered revolutionary? I guess Napoleon is also revolutionary. Let's search on Grok. Is Napoleon revolutionary? I think that if you will read it again and again, and if you will think about it, and if you will relate to the previous chapters, previous books, previous subjects, sorry, previous books, previous years books, then you will be able to understand that without searching all this. But if you did not get it, but then you must search it. You cannot be seeking to it or looking for it if you don't know it. Let's say you did not know about it, that whether it's a revolutionary or not a revolutionary, or you are unable to conclude that, then you must search about it so that you can know whether he is or he was or he wasn't. And then after reading all the book, all the whatever is needed to for you to study in the year, then you can think about searching more of how can you conclude that from the reading of the book, that whether someone is revolutionary or not. If yes, then write a short biography. Then write his short biography. It is taking time to come out, that obviously it would do, but I think we must have patience. And in general life, the time that something takes, we can't know how much time it would take, right? So in this case, you can do other thing, and set a timer. You have to be aware. But I hope that new technology and new advancements will reduce the time. Yes, Napoleon Bonaparte is widely considered a revolutionary figure. He rose to power during the French Revolution. This is the biography, short biography, I think. No, it starts from here. Napoleon Bonaparte, 1769 to 1821, was a French military genius and statesman who transformed Europe. Born on August 15, 1769 in Ajaccio, Corsica, shortly after France acquired the island, into a minor noble family, he trained at military academies in France and embraced the revolutionary ideals of 1789. He rose rapidly in the Revolutionary Army, gaining fame for victories like the siege of Toulon 1793 and campaigns in Italy 1796 to 1797. In 1799, he staged the coup of 18 Brumaire, becoming first consul and effectively ruler of France. He introduced lasting reforms, the Napoleonic Code 1804, promoting legal equality and property rights, centralized administration, the Bank of France, and educational improvements. In 1804, he crowned himself Emperor Napoleon I in a grand ceremony. His grand army conquered much of Europe, spreading revolutionary laws but sparking coalitions against him. Defeats in Russia 1812 and at Leipzig 1830 weakened him, leading to exile on Elba 1814. He returned briefly for the Hundred Days in 1815 but was finally defeated at Waterloo. Exiled to remote St. Helena, he died on May 5, 1821. His legacy endures in modern legal systems, nationalism, and military strategy. The French Revolution saw the rise of newspapers, describing the events of each day and week. Collect information and pictures on any one event and write a newspaper article. Collect information and pictures on any one event and write a newspaper article. I guess it is talking about the event. So, any one event. Is it like in 1804 Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France? I think this is also an event, if I think about it. But there is not much you can write about as an article from this chapter, from this information only. Or maybe they're telling us to find information from the web, from the internet. Because if that is the case, then they must have written it better. You could also conduct an imaginary interview with important personages such as Mirabeau, Olympiacos, or Robespierre. Working groups of two or three, each group could then put up their articles on a board to produce a wallpaper on the French Revolution. I guess they're talking about, maybe I think I should try both. Let's find out the any one event of the French Revolution. So the first event is that Napoleon Bonaparte. One of that is that Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself the Emperor of France. But there hasn't been much written here. I think we can go back. Let's see what is here. The abolition of slavery, the colonies, and blah 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 blah. The exploitation of slave labor. I think this is one of the event. One of the most revolutionary social reforms of the Jacobin regime was the abolition of slavery in the French colonies. The colonies in the Caribbean, Martinique, Guadeloupe, and San Domingo were important suppliers of commodities such as tobacco, indigo, sugar, and coffee. But the reluctance of Europeans to go and work in distant and unfamiliar lands meant a shortage of labor on the plantations. So this was met by a triangular slave trade between Europe, Africa, and the Americas. The slave trade began in the 17th century. French merchants sailed from the ports of Bordeaux or Nantes to the African coast, where they bought slaves from local chieftains. Branded and shackled slaves were packed tightly into ships for the 3-month-long voyage across the Atlantic to the Caribbean. They were sold. There they were sold to plantation owners. The exploitation of slave labor made it possible to meet the growing demand in European markets for sugar, coffee, and indigo. Port cities like Bordeaux and Nantes owed their economic prosperity to the flourishing slave trade. Can it be considered as an event? It's Can it be considered an event? I doubt that. I think it spans like from long, like it is a long, it is a long continuity of time. So it may not be. I think I would like to find some. I think this one would be better. The life of a revolutionary woman, Olympic causes. But let's find out. The reign of terror. I honestly think that there have never been a writing of a specific event in this chapter. Maybe a span of continuity. I think. Yeah, I think let's do this. Let's choose the life of a revolutionary woman, Olympia de Gaugues, 1748 to 1793. Let's see. Let's find out how to write. Can we find out about the execution of her? Yeah, that would be better. No, I don't think that would be better actually. But that would be a piece of info that we can use. French Revolution saw the rise of, or we can choose when she wrote those rights of women, that can be done. Let's see how to write a newspaper article. I think collect information and pictures from any one event and write a newspaper article seems to take it from the web, to search from the internet, not from the book. So at first we can search on, because it doesn't collect, so it may be in the book, I think. Let's first search how to write a newspaper article. How to write a newspaper article. It is taking time to search, but I think it can be paused though. Paper article. How to write a newspaper article? Newspaper article has clear factual reporting using the inverted pyramid structure. The most important information: who, what, when, where, why, how, comes first, followed by supporting details and background at the end. This allows readers to grasp the essentials quickly and editors to cut from the bottom if needed. Here is a classic diagram of the inverted pyramid structure. Key elements of a newspaper article. Typical layout includes headline, catchy, concise summary, byline, your name and deadline, location, lead, first paragraph with the F5Ws plus H, body, details, quotes, context in decreasing importance, conclusion, background, list, essential info, rally to bring awareness to bullying. Yeah, that makes sense. Alright, so we can do it like this. Okay, fine, let's do this. Yeah. Alright, let's make it for the life of a revolutionary woman. We can write death, no, not death of freedom. We can use the as the headline, and then comes the name and date, location. My name is Sebe May, and the date is 13th January 2026, and the location is India. And then comes the first paragraph. Today, Olympic is protested against the Constitution and the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen, as they excluded women from basic rights that each human being was entitled to. I will remove the word today from the starting. She protested against the. Today, she wrote a declaration of the rights of women and citizens, which she addressed to the Queen and to the members of the National Assembly, demanding that they act upon it. This, this is the paragraph. If I can think about it, this is the paragraph, and then comes the body. That is the detail. You know, forth in Olympic August Declaration. First, woman is born free and remain equal to man in rights. Second, the goal of all political associations is the preservation of the natural rights of women and men. These rights are liberty, property, security, and overall resistance to oppression. Third, the source of all sovereignty resides in the nation, which is nothing but the union of women and men. Four, the laws should be the expression of the general will. All female and male citizens should have a say either personally or by their representatives in its formulation. It should be the same for all. All female and male citizens are equally entitled to all honors and public employment according to their abilities and without any other distinction than that of their talents. 5. No woman is an exception. She is accused, arrested, and detained in cases determined by law. Women, like men, obey this rigorous law. And then comes the context. Then comes the conclusion. Olympedagogues. Let me find out the conclusion, least essential for background. All right, let me. Nice to know, but not essential. Okay, fine. Nice to know, but not essential. Okay, we can write that. We can write that Olympedagogue is one of the most important of the politically active women in the revolutionary France. That we can write to end, or in current France. That would be pretty much enough. You could also conduct an imaginary interview with important personages such as Mirabeau. Let's go to Mirabeau. Mirabeau was born in a noble family but was convinced of the need to do away with a society of feudal privilege. Let's search feudal. Pronunciation of feudal.
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 Feudal. Feudal privilege refers to the special rights, exemptions, and advantages enjoyed by the higher class, mainly by the nobility and the clergy, under the feudal system. These privileges were hereditary, passed on in families, and created deep social inequality. So, Mirabeau was born in noble family but was convinced of the need to do away with a society of feudal privilege. So, if I will go out and take an interview with him, I will ask him that there are many people who are right now living in feudal privilege. Society is having feudal privilege. What do you think about this? How to stop this? So I think Mirabeau will say to me that you gotta do a revolution. You gotta convince them that they must, not like violently, because he had not done it violently, but you must convince those people who are well off, well rich, that they must pass some of that wealth to the poor people, whom they can uplift from their poverty, from their situation, from their misery, as well as tell the poor. Yeah, that will be the thing that Mirabeau will tell me, the first thing. And yeah, that is the one thing that I think Mirabeau will tell me if I will take his interview. Who is the other person whom I must ask? Olympedagogues. I will ask Olympedagogues that right now many women are unable to have the free right, as have equal life, are not have equality in Asian countries, especially India. So Olympedagogues will reply to me that you must uplift them, you must take them to take part, tell them to take part into politics, which can give them the powers which they can use to help other women to get out of the slavery of their families, of their brothers and fathers, and to have their own life. You must tell all the females to form a coalition, to form a coalition with each other, to become powerful physically, mentally, to not be dependent on others, as well as to start owning lands, to start being part of the administration, politics, and not being dependent on men. One must not be weak. One must not be weak, because if one is, for one to remain weak, someone has to become strong to defend that person. I think that will be the sum up of Olympedagogues. Now Robespierre. What would Robespierre tell me? I would say to Robespierre that many governments in Russia, Israel, India, and many other countries where there are dictatorships, there are many people who are attacking each other. The governments are executing people in Iran, Saudi Arabia. There are many countries where there is no democracy. You talked about liberty, you talked about freedom, equality, republic, but only in these countries where there is no equality, where there is no republic, people are being executed. They agree with their rulers agree with your views. What do you think about it? I think Robespierre will say that, uh, yeah, I know that, and I think that is true, and I think, no, not remove that. I think that is true, remove that part. I think he will say that, the people who are democratic, the democratic rulers must also follow it, because that is how. And then he will make his illogical statement, that is, to establish and consolidate democracy, to achieve the peaceful rule of constitutional law, we must first finish the war of liberty against tyranny. We must first annihilate the enemies of the republic at home and abroad, or else we shall perish. I think that is all. Work in groups of 2 or 3. Each group could then put up their articles on a board to produce a wallpaper on the French Revolution. I think they are talking about the different type of interviews that everyone can do or make, or maybe it can create an article or wallpaper of the French Revolution, which will be like the ideas or collage of ideas of different people. But so yeah, you can do that. Questions. Describe the circumstances leading to the outbreak of revolutionary protest in France. Circumstances leading to the outbreak of revolutionary protest in France. So here the first thing that we are going to check is what the outbreak means. That is the first thing that we are going to do. So let's search the meaning of outbreak on Merriam-Webster. Outbreak. A sudden and violent increase in activity or currency. So the what is it asking about is, here we go. Let's check this. Yeah. So what is it asking about? The sudden increase in activity. You know, the sudden increase in activity, and it is asking about the outbreak, not the outbreaks. So the first, it's asking about the first, right? The first sudden increase in activity or violence in a revolutionary protest in France. So let's search this back to the first. Okay, let's start with the first. This is obviously not part of the chapter. This is the starting, and the explanation is starting from here. Here is the explanation of how the things were happening in France, and how uh, Louis XVI had to increase taxes, and who used to pay for the taxes, the struggle to survive subsistence crisis, and the invisits of growing middle class for an end to privileges. That is this. Here comes the outbreak of the revolution, the first mention of it, and that, if you can see around here, Louis XVI had to increase taxes for reasons, etc., etc. And then, if you will go through, rather, he had to call a meeting. The meeting was called obviously by the Louis XVI, the first and the second and the third, and then the third estate, they walked out, and then they tried to go out and do all that. So during all this, when did the circumstances that led to this, the circumstances that led to this was the first thing is that Louis 16 called the meeting of the representatives, of the first, second, and third state, and then the third state was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. This is not going to come in it. Voting in the States General in the past had been conducted according to the principle that each state had one vote. This time, too, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice. But members of the third state demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member now have one vote. So earlier it used to be like first, second, and third each had one vote, and now they want every member of the combination of all these three to have one vote. That was one that is going to be in the answer. This was one of the democratic principles. This is not going to be in it. When the king rejected this proposal, members of the third estate walked out of the assembly in protest. This is leading to it, those circumstances that led to it. This is one of those. The representatives of the third estate viewed themselves as exposed. No, this is not going to come in it. On 20 June, they assembled in the hall of an indoor tennis court in the grounds of Versailles. They declared themselves a national assembly and swore not to disperse till they drafted a constitution for France that would limit the powers of the monarch. They were led by, that is not going to be in it. He brought out a journal, sorry, Mirabeau brought out a journal and delivered powerful speeches to the crowds assembled at Versailles. While the National Assembly was busy at Versailles drafting a constitution, the rest of France seethed with turmoil. A severe winter had meant a bad harvest. The price of bread rose often, bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women stormed into the shops. At the same time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14 July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor had hired bands of brigands who were on their way to destroy the crops. Caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts seized horses and pitchforks and attacked street horses. They looted hoarded grain and burned down documents containing records of manorial dues. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. Seized with the power of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally accorded recognition to the National Assembly and accepted the principle that his powers would from now on be checked by constitution. On the night of 4 August 1789, so this is the answer. Like all the circumstances that led to this, these circumstances led to the outbreak of the first outbreak of the revolution, in which there stormed, like the violent activity or the sudden increase in activity, all this, like the walking out of the third estate, their drafting of constitution of to uh, control the monarch or limit the power of monarch, as well as all this that the or the that the problems that were there, in buying food grains, and then they stormed the Bastille or attacked the people, and the people had to flee away from the country. So all of this is going to come in it. So on the night of 4 August, before that, you are going to write all of this, and you can summarize this, like shorten this too, that you can do with the help of yourself. You have to think about it, like what can be done to what words can or what lines can explain all of this, and what is extra, so you have to do this, and you can do it. Which groups of French society benefited from the revolution, which groups were forced to relinquish power. So which groups of French society benefited from the revolution, that is the first thing I would say. We can go back and search this. The first thing that I remember is that the rich people, they got uh, especially from the third estate, they got it, and as well as the peasants, they got free from slavery, so that also helped them, so it helped a lot of people. If we go through all this, like when the France becomes a constitutional monarchy here, the Constitution of 1791 vested the power to make laws in the National Assembly, which was indirectly elected. That is, citizens voting for a group of electors who in turn choose the assembly. Not all citizens, however, had the right to vote. Only men over 25 years of age who paid taxes equal to at least 3 days of laborer's wage were given the status of active citizens. So those who were who fell inactive citizens, they got the benefit. That is, they were entitled to vote. The remaining men and women were classed as passive citizens to qualify as an elector, and then a member of the National Assembly. A man had to belong to the highest bracket of taxpayers. So these people also got the benefit. The constitution began with a declaration of the rights of man and citizens. Rights such as the right to life, freedom of speech, freedom of opinion, equality before law were established as natural and inalienable rights, that is, they belong to each human being by birth and could not be taken away. It was a duty of the state to protect each citizen's natural rights. So this is not going to be in the answer. France abolishes monarchy and becomes a republic. The situation in France continued to be tense during the following years. Although Louis XVI had signed the constitution, let's check one thing. I think I forgot to check it. The first thing was there that people got freed. That is the one thing that they got out of the slavery. It must be served equally on all citizens in proportion to their means. Since property is sacred and inviolable, right? No one will be deprived of it. All right, let me check the writing by the Marat. That is the task of representing the people has been given to the rich. So they got the freedom benefit from the revolution. The lot of the poor and oppressed will never be proved of peaceful means alone. Here we have still proof of how wealth influences the law. Yet laws will last only as long as the people agree to obey them. And when they manage to cast off the yoke of the aristocrats, they will do the same to the other owners of wealth. So I think here, that I'm missing the fact where people got away from slavery or people got free from slavery. It is not here written, or maybe I'm missing it. Men are born and remain free and equal in rights. So yeah, because see, the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen is there, but there are few things that are contradictory in it. Especially that men are born and remain free and equal in rights, because that is violated when you the classify someone as active citizens and someone as passive citizens. You violate that. Yeah, the truth is that one thing that is confirmed is that the feudal privileges, if you can read here, they are privileges that are written that most the members of the first two estates, that is the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. The most important of these was exemption for paying taxes to the state. The nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. They included feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. So they will be happy because all the feudal privileges were removed after the first outbreak. And how it led to the first outbreak, and how it happened and how it concluded. The peasants were peasants were sorry, not the first outbreak. The peasants got after the revolution. The peasants got free of paying these dues. uh, Peasants were obliged to render services. So basically, the slavery of the peasants that got get that was out from the continuity. So that is, peasants would be happy. The first thing that they would be, the third estate would be happy because only they had to pay taxes. The That was one thing that I would say happened because of the revolution. Which groups were forced to relinquish power? So let's find out the meaning of relinquish. That is important to know about. If we want to do something, then we want to know what it means at the first thing. So the relinquish is to withdraw or retreat from the power. So those who were powerful, they lost the power. Who were the powerful? The noble and the clergy. They were powerful because they had feudal privileges and they had feudal dues, which got removed, as written here in the first when the revolution took place. Members of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. Assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. So taxes were abolished and the lands owned by the church were confiscated. So church had to lose the power. As a result, the government monarch has to lose the power. The government has to lose the power because the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. Sorry, the monarch lost because the government got that. From the church. So that is the one thing. Nobles and the clergy fled. Many nobles and the clergy fled from the revolution when the outbreak took place. So they lost the power. So you can read all that, in there, and then you can, at first you have to read all of it, and then you have to understand all of it, and then you can write it down to understand the answer of it. Which section of society would have been disappointed with the outcome of the revolution? The there are two ways to think about this. The first is just after the revolution, obviously the nobles and the clergy, they were disappointed with that. And then after the revolution, when the declaration was done, and then women were converted as into passive citizens, so they will be disappointed after that. And the peasants, those who were poor, not the peasants, those who were poor, they were also a part of it, because they cannot get into the active citizen bracket, so they would be disappointed with that after the revolution succeeded. Describe the legacy of the French Revolution for the peoples of the world during the 19th and 20th centuries. Well, you can see that when the revolution took place, then the people around, how they uh, think about it. Let me search the legacy meaning, what it means actually. Like, do I have to talk about how people felt around the world like it is in this book, or do I have to think about how they would have felt? So you have to know to know, right? You can't know without knowing. So what was I going to search? Yeah, let me search this. Legacy, yep. So what is legacy? Let's know this. Something such as a personal property or money that is willed to someone by person who has died. No, that is not the thing. Something transmitted by or received from an ancestor or predecessor or from the past. That is true. Something transmitted or received from the past. Of relating to, associated with, or carried over from an earlier time, technology, business. Yeah, this seems also better. Of relating to, associated with, or carried over from an earlier time. So it is relating to an earlier time. So when the legacy, in the legacy part, there are two ways to see this. The first thing is when it happened, so in the past, like how it affected the people in the future after that happened. So that is the one way. And the second, I would unable to look at it. Let's see, something such as personal property or money. That, no, that is not the one. Something that is transmitted or received from an ancestor. I don't think this sounds better. That got received. It was like, yeah, it was a part of the past. And the second definition sounds better, more appropriate. That relating to, associated with, or carried over from an earlier time. That sounds better. So it was an earlier time. How do people associate with it? Let me search one more thing. If we will go to the question again, we will see what we have to search. So the question is, yeah, describe the legacy of the French Revolution for the peoples of the world during the 19th and 20th centuries. At first we have to check if there is anything written for about this in the book, in the chapter. So as much as I remember, there is nothing such as that. I don't think it is written that how French Revolution, in the book it isn't written that how it affected the people. uh, but I guess they are talking about how they would have, maybe that could have been the one way. Let's search about that if they want to talk about that. How do I have to search on web about this? Describe the legacy of the French Revolution. Let me search this on AI. Describe the legacy of the French Revolution. Describe the legacy of the French Revolution for the peoples of the world. For the peoples of the world. See, I'm not skipping all this because I want you to know how I did this, or how it must be done, you can say. for the peoples of the world during the 19th and 20th centuries. During the 19th and 20th centuries. Well, so it's going to take some time to search about it. But I think, sorry, I think I missed the question. I had to ask uh, if this question is asked because see, English can have different meanings or how it is. But I think obviously it sounds like you have to search on the web to know it. If this question is asked, then in a chapter which doesn't have any such account, then do I assume the answer or search on web? Assume the answer on the basis of obviously on the basis of the situation around the world at that time, because maybe the poor got and the oppressed, they would have liked it. And the rich and the powerful, they may not have liked it. That's the most possible answer for this. So we need to search this. Most probably, I think, yeah, we have to search on the web to know it, which I think is pretty much illogical because this must be in the books. If you are asking a question in a book, you what I give the all the resources that are needed to answer it in the book. You cannot allow or ask somebody to search on the web to know it. Otherwise, it's a waste of time. You could have added all of this in the question. All in the chapter. Because it's a waste. It's like illogical. You want somebody to, or maybe you could have added it, or maybe you could have said that you got a search in on the web, that you could have said, because if someone who may think of logically that okay fine, the answer must be in the book, that person will search it again and again and will never be able to find it, so, and more or less it allows people to have more expanded version of it, like people are confused about it and people may think of that there may be many ways of doing this, like the answer can be longer or the answer can be shorter, but if that would have been in the book, then people would have known that how much longer or shorter could be the answer or must be the answer. Legacy of the French Revolution for the peoples of the world, 19th and 20th centuries. The French Revolution, 1790 to 1799, introduced the powerful ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity, which profoundly shaped political, social, and national movements worldwide around the 19th and 20th centuries. Its legacy inspired struggles against monarchy, feudalism, and colonialism, laying the foundation for modern democracy, nationalism, and human rights. So, this part is not going to come in it. In the answer, impacted in the 19th century, spread of liberal and democratic ideas in Europe. This revolutionary concepts traveled across Europe via Napoleon's armies and intellectuals. They fueled the revolutions of 1830 and 1848, leading to constitutional monarchies in countries like Belgium and France, and the abolition of feudal privileges and serfdom in many regions. I guess the France must not have been it because it is the French Revolution, right? So it was already there. I mean, it was like for other countries, not for France. So I guess you can remove that part. Because when that something happens, then it becomes a legacy for others. So after that, I would say that would have been better. But yeah, it is what it is. And the abolition of feudal privileges, yeah. So you can remove the France from this, and you can obviously remember the date when the date is being talked about. It must be after the date when the revolution ended. So the date you must know. The first revolution was after the third estate drafted and made France a constitutional monarchy. And the last one was the yeah, that's the first thing. That's the first thing that happened, and then the people fought. The people went to war and then they removed the king, beheaded the king. So let's proceed with its impact in the 19th century. Spread of liberal democratic ideas in Europe. So remove the France out of it. Rise of nationalism. The idea of a sovereign nation state inspired unification movements. It contributed to the unification of Italy, Risorgimento, and Germany under Bismarck, where people sought national independence and unity against fragmented rule. So this is one thing, but you must obviously check the dates on the web, if it is after the French Revolution. Independence movements outside Europe. Colonized peoples adapted the slogan of liberty, equality, fraternity to fight foreign rule. In Latin America, leaders like Simon Bolivar, you can check its pronunciation on the web. Check its pronunciation on Merriam-Webster as well as on the AI. Don't use Google for it because Google may be wrong. The inspiration for independence wars against Spanish rule 1810 to 1820s, because generally I've seen that Google is generally not correct. The Greek War of Independence 1820s also echoed these ideals. Social reforms. The revolution promoted equality before the law, abolition of censorship, and rights to property and education. The Napoleonic Code, Civil Code of 1804 influenced legal systems worldwide, emphasizing equality and secular law. Impact in the 20th century. Anti-colonial and freedom struggles. Colonized nations in Asia and Africa worked revolutionary ideas into demands for self-rule. Leaders like Ho Chi Minh in Vietnam and nationalists in India. Example: Tipu Sultan and Raja Ram Mohan Roy were earlier influenced used these principles against imperialism. The revolution directly supported decolonization post World War II. Inspiration for socialist and communist movements. So inspiration for socialist and communist movements that was in there. Uh, the emphasis on equality influenced the Russian Revolution, 1917, and later revolutions in China and elsewhere, where people fought for social justice and workers' rights. Foundation of human rights and democracy. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen, 1789, became a model for model constitutions, and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, 1948. It promoted republicanism and democratic governance globally. Overall, the French Revolution acted as a beacon of hope against tyranny, making ideas of freedom and equality universal aspirations that drove progressive changes. Regarding the second question, if the chapter lacks a detailed count, this is a standard exercise question. Question 3 from Ncert Class 9 History. Okay. Chapter 1, the French Revolution, India as a contemporary world. 1. The chapter itself has a brief section on the legacy. The ideas of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. They spread from France to the rest of Europe during the 19th century, where feudal systems were abolished. Colonized peoples revoked the idea of freedom. Alright, so that is the one thing I may have missed. It can happen. I think, as I said before, you gotta revise to remember to know. I did not revise enough as I'm doing it once, so I may not have known, I may not have remembered it, but yeah, we must go through this. Yeah, here you go. In the conclusion part, that is, the ideas of liberty and democratic rights were the most important legacy of the French Revolution. These spread from France to the rest of Europe during the 19th century, where feudal systems were abolished. Colonized peoples revoked the idea of freedom from bondage into their movements to create a sovereign national state. Tipu Sultan and Ram Mohan Roy are two examples of individuals who responded to the ideas coming from revolutionary France. So this is going to be the answer. Yeah, that was correct. Then that was mistaken. So what we can learn from this is you got to revise to remember to know it. If you don't revise to remember, then you may forget it, and then you may not be able to find from that. So the first part is obviously searching through the book. But as I did not revise it, so I thought that it isn't in the book, but I must have checked it again. Draw up a list of democratic rights we enjoy today, whose origins could be traced to the French Revolution. So we have to find out the rights that got in the French Revolution, and then we got to match it up with the rights that we have in India. So all the rights of the man and citizen was there. That's the first thing that we have to write out. And the Declaration of Rights of Man and Citizen. This men are born and remain free and equal in rights. I think this is one thing that I think is in the Constitution, as that I have felt. But you can search about it uh, in the book. On the AI. The aim of every political association is the preservation of the natural and inalienable rights of man. These are liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. This may or may not be in the rights or in India, but I think this is, or let's search this. I think we have to search this, that all that are in the part, or that have come from it, or that may have been influenced, or may have resemblance to this. Draw up a list of. At first, I think we should know about how many rights do we have, in India. How many rights do we have in India whose origin could be one is a voting right too, that got after, I guess, the defeat of Napoleon, because in between I can check again, because obviously you got to revise to actually trace all that. How many tribes do we have in India whose origin could be traced back to, traced to the French Revolution, whose origins could be traced. So here it is talking about the possibility. It may or may not be true, but like it may not be the reason, but can be the reason, because they will be similar. So that is how we have to search it. And obviously, as I said before, you got to revise to remember to know. If you won't revise to remember, you may miss it the way I missed. So always check the book again and again, the chapter again and again. So I think that was a mistake that I called out NCRT, but yeah, maybe the last time, but I hope so. But I don't think that NCRT is well written. I don't know why, but many people have questioned it. It is outdated, obviously, but yeah, the way it is written, it is very bad. It can be written better way, in a more logical way, I would say. But yeah, you cannot say that till, like, I cannot say that from the all the writing that I had, or from all the reading that I had. Maybe I'm wrong, but one thing that I remember is that you got to revise to remember, and when you have to find something that is in the book, you got to go back again and again, unless and until you have revised it a lot, which you can search how many times you revise to remember all of it, on the web. So if you've done that, then you got to, yeah, you don't have to check. Then you have to just, if it is not in your mind, then you can just proceed to search on AI, and you can even check on the web like this, the way I checked, that it is not in the book. So maybe you have to revise more. Your question ties directly into NCRT. Okay, fine. The correct answer is number. There isn't an exact fixed number of rights in the Indian Constitution that originates slowly from the French Revolution. As our fundamental rights, Part 3, draws from multiple sources. Example is here: U.S. Bill of Rights for Freedom, British for Remedy. However, the clearest and most direct legacy is the three core ideals from the French Revolution's motto: liberty, equality, and fraternity. These are explicitly adopted in the preamble of the Indian Constitution. So, if you are counting the foundational principles that trace straight back, it's three. Equality is strongly linked to the French idea of ending privileges, feudalism. Right, reflected in right to equality, Articles 14 to 18, equality before law, no discrimination, abolition of untouchability, Article 17, abolition of titles, Article 18, liberty from the revolutionary emphasis on individual freedoms, reflected in right to freedom, Articles 19 to 22, speech, expression, assembly, association, movement, professional liberty. Fraternity, promoting brotherhood and unity, influences the overall spirit, exemplification and unity of the individual. Article 21, unity, integrity of India and social harmony provisions. Common list for the NCRT activities. Democratic rights. Right to equality before the law, freedom of speech and expression, freedom from arbitrary arrest, protection against detention, right to personal liberty, freedom of religion, secular equality, sometimes universal and franchise, democratic participation. So that is the thing. In short, no strict count like 7 or 6. That is the total fundamental rights categories. But the French Revolution's biggest gift to India is those three timeless ideals in our preamble, shaping modern democracy and rights. All right, so I think that would be enough. But is this in the book? Is this in the chapter? Like this part that you can trace it back, like something that came out of the of this? I don't think because I no, Ncert is incorrect because would you agree with the view that the message of universal rights was beset with contradictions? Let's just what is beset, Yeah, go fast. Because Grok is generally right, in comparison to other AIs, even if you search fast. Beset is a versatile English verb, past tense, present tense, beset, present. Okay, fine. The beset someone means to surround or overwhelm them with difficulties, problems, troubles, or dangers, often from all sides, making it feel inescapable or harassing. All right, this sounds better. Would you agree with the view that the message of universal rights was beset with contradiction? I guess it's in the chapter. It's the part of the chapter. Message of universal rights, was beset with a contradiction. Okay, fine. Is it like the universal rights? If you go with universal rights, then I guess it is trying to say that the message of the universal right, let's see the rights of the man and the citizen, that got out from the first outbreak. Universal. So can France have universal freedom? Can France talk about universal? French talk about universal rights? Message of universal rights. Would you agree with the view? Let me search this. Would you agree with the view that the message of universal rights was? That the message of universal rights was beset with contradictions? Explain. So you got a revise to know, you got a revise to know. That's the first thing which I haven't done. But I just want to know that this is the question. I want to know if it meant, well, which I most probably think, but we can verify always. If it meant that the rights that got out of French Revolution, that rights that were given to French citizens, the rights that were result of French Revolution. I want to know if it meant that the rights that were result of French Revolution were um, contradictory. Yep, this sounds the most appropriate explanation of the question. The question that is being asked. That is what I think of. Yes, I agree with the view that the message of universal rights during the French Revolution, but this is contradicts what the question is. The question is not that the rights themselves, the right to equality, liberty, before the law of freedom of speech were logically contradictory, or if the position is the body, it is pointing out the that the right to universal, but for all human beings, logically contradictory. So, yeah. after the first one, all the things that happened, like those groups who would not have been happy with it, the first thing after the rights, the first criteria to get into active citizens, they were not equal, and if men are born and remain free and equal in rights. Law is the expression of the general will. All citizens have the right to participate in its formation, personally or through their representatives. All citizens are equal before it. So yeah, they are. All right. And so that is the thing that were contradictory or got contradicted. One thing I wanted to recheck, that the French colonies, what happened with the French colonies. Well, is this also a part of it? The French colonies? Yeah, this is a part of it in the answer of the AI. But yeah, continuation of slavery in colonies. But here I'm confused about it. But because the French Revolution and the rights that it came out of it, they were for French people. That will be applicable on French people, right? The France. But if it is a colony of France, is the not the definition a bit different than of just the French people? I would say. Let me think about it. The organization colonies poor, so like that. So one thing that I'm confused about, the continuation of slavery in colonies, and I want to search it more further. That are they out of it? Like, one thing that I'm confused about here is, like, about French colonies, about French colonies, about slavery in French colonies, about slavery. Don't you think that the rights that came out of French Revolution, because the distinction need to be there, would be applicable. But one thing that I'm confused about in here is that France is not occupied by French people, like France is not occupied by French people because obviously they are France. But in the case of colonies, they are acquired by it. So is it applicable on there? But I think, yeah, it is. I think I was wrong, because see, if there is a colony of something, that means that it is a part of it, their rule. So if it is a part of their rule, then their laws are applicable on them. So yeah, that is true. That the slavery thing that they talked about, I think, yeah, that is true. That it was not removed in the colonies. So that is the one thing that is true about it, because if that would have been done, that would have been, because they are basically a part of it. Like when you have a colony, then you are making it a part of your property or of your country. So they are like, France included that. So yeah, that is true, completely true, that slavery was practiced there. That got abolished in mainland, or you can say the France, which was not a colony of France, but that didn't get abandoned or changed there, So yeah, that is true. I think I was wrong in the thinking. I must have thought about it like this. And how I was wrong, I don't know. But maybe because I thought that the definition of France and French colonies would have been different. But French colony is a part of France. It's like British, India was a part of Britain when British took over here, So it's like automatically a part of it, what I'm saying. So if it is applicable, the French Revolution's results, they will be applicable on France as well as French colonies too, So yeah, it was beset with contradictions. How do you explain the rise of Napoleon? Let me search if it is in the book. How do you explain the rise of Napoleon? Let me search where the Napoleon thing is. In 1894, Napoleon Bonaparte crowned himself Emperor of France. He set out to conquer neighboring European countries, dispossessing dynasties, and creating kingdoms where he placed members of his family. Napoleon saw his role as a modernizer of Europe. He introduced many laws such as the protection of private property and a uniform system of weights and measures provided by the decimal system. Initially, many saw Napoleon as a liberator who would bring freedom for the people, but soon the Napoleonic armies came to be viewed everywhere as an invading force. He was finally defeated at Waterloo in 1815. Let me search about it. It is like you got to talk about the biography of Napoleon. How do you explain the rise of Napoleon? Is it about exactly how it happened, how it got, what I read about? Explain about the rise of Napoleon. Explain about the rise of Napoleon. How do you explain the rise of Napoleon? Uh, in this, do we have to just talk about how he rose or won, or the reason behind it? Because I don't think the reason is given in the book. Or maybe they want to know, but I don't think enough is given in uh, as the reason of why it happened. Is also possible because of the political instability of the revolution, his own military brilliance. How he rose, reasons behind it. But is it in the book? Is it in the book? Let me search that. Is it in the book? Are the reasons in the book? Are the reasons in the book? Because about the assumption, there has to be given something, that why it could have happened. Because I don't think there is as any enough have been given, but we can check it again. As I said before, I haven't revised it a lot. All right, I missed it. I think this is the core reason highlighted in the Ncert text. It explains that the directing the 1795-99 public faced constant threats and could not provide stable governance. It is perfect opportunity for a strong leader like Napoleon to take control. Now, all right, let me search it again. As I said before, my previous doubt that I haven't revised enough is indeed true. Let me go back to the abolition of slavery. One of the most revolutionary social reforms of the Jacobin regime was the abolition of slavery in the French colonies. The exploitation of slave. I'm unable to find it. Is it like removed in it? Or is it here? Women's struggle. Did women have a revolution? Directory rules France. Yeah, here it is. The fall of the Jacobin government allowed the wealthier middle classes to seize power. A new constitution was introduced which denied the vote non-property sections of society. It provided for two elected legislative councils. These then appointed a directory. Won't that be a part of that? That the French people, the beset with contradictions, rights, universal rights. I think that would also be part because that also happened uh, after the French Revolution. So that non-property sections of the society were taken, the voting right were taken from that after the fall of Jacobin government. Well, you can search about it. Let me check it again. The answer. I guess yeah, that is true. That is true. You can take it because it is obviously part of the chapter. So you can say that yeah, it was beset with contradictions. Because also this would be a part of it. But one thing that I'm confused about is because it got there was a new constitution was there. So maybe it wasn't. Let me search it again. But yeah, I think because there was a new constitution there. So the earlier the universal rights that was in the constitution. It's not like someone will say it and you will start implementing it. So as the constitution was changed, so there was no contradiction then. The contradiction was there when the constitution said that yeah, there you have to be equal and also this won't come in it. These then departed directly. Our executive made of five members. This was meant as a safeguard against the concentration of power in a one-man executive as under the Jacobins. However, the directors often clashed with the legislative councils, who then sought to dismiss them. The political instability of the directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. So, I think it will start from a new constitution was introduced to the political stability of the directory paved the way for the rise of a military dictator, Napoleon Bonaparte. Yeah, that would be the way. That would be the answer of it. So this won't be a part of it, I think. Yeah, this won't be part. The conclusion part, Napoleon Bonaparte. This is the answer most probably. Yes, that. And I could have known it if I would have revised it enough. But let me check if there is anything else. Political stability and weakness of the directory. True. Napoleon's coup. That is not in there. I think. I don't think Napoleon's coup is there. I think the book also builds. Is it also in there? You got to revise a lot, to remember all this. I think I don't think the coup is there. Maybe in their words that they are in the important dates. Oh my god, I missed the important dates. If you remember, there were important dates given at the right side or the left side. You can say of the book. Important dates. It may have something like that. Important dates are most possibly here we go. 1804, Napoleon becomes Emperor of France, annexes large parts of Europe. But I don't think that is in there. Or that is the reason of how that happened. So let me proceed. Let me proceed further. Let me proceed further. Napoleon thing. Napoleon I don't think that is in there, is it? But the coup thing, I don't think it's in there. I think it is written that the coup happened and then it, Napoleon took over. You know, about the coup date. Let me search it again. I don't think that coup by Napoleon is mentioned. Only political instability point is there. Can we limit the answer to that? Because that is what I think. Because I don't think the book expects more. Than what is already in it. Because if you add more and more, then it can go. It is like illogical. You can have more always. All right, that is true. Yes, definitely limit your answer to the textbook point. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. So limit the point. So you've got this. So the answer is going to be from years ago. A constitution was introduced to the rise of a military dictator Napoleon Bonaparte. This is going to be the answer of the last question, and that's it.